Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the January 16th meeting of the Board of Education. Cammie, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blanks?
Here.
Dr. Greenberg?
Here.
Mr. Paul
Here.
Ms. Poland?
Here.
Dr. Thomas Farkason?
Here.
Mr. Zdanowitz?
Here.
Student Representatives Grace Andrews?
Here.
And Maddie Pliskin.
Here.
All right, I'm not even going to pretend I ever remember. Who gets to lead us in the pledge today?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As far as I know, there is no revision to the agenda order. Is that right? So let's go to what's always the highlight of our evening, student participation, the Florence E. Smith STEM School Lego Robotics team. And parents, if you're here and want to take pictures, you can always come behind us and do that.
Hello, we are the Smith STEM School. We are Smith STEM School, and we are here to tell you about First Lego League. Thank you for having us.
This is delete right there.
Other user?
Yes.
Passcode.
Should I sign it?
What's that?
Sign it.
I thought it was. What is it? I can type it in.
No, I'm not giving you my password.
Same school as you. Why would you try? Math work would be good.
No. Yes, Andy.
Well, while we're waiting, I'll just say for the formal record that even though his name wasn't called, Rob Levine is here.
Sorry for being late, folks.
Paul. Paul, what's your password?
Hello, we are Smith STEM School, and we are here to talk about First Lego League. Thank you for having us.
What is First Lego League?
First LEGO League is a competition for kids in grades 4 through 8.
Each team is made up of up to 10 kids and 2 coaches.
Each team learns how to program a robot and create a solution to a real-life problem that goes with a topic.
This year's topic is hydrodynamics. Kids also learn core values, which are a huge part of the competition.
Smith had 2 teams. Our STEAM PM team, which worked 2 days a week after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, was the Hydro Warriors. It is made up of 4th and 5th graders who applied to be in the team.
Our 5th grade quest team, the Flowbots, came during school on Tuesdays and Fridays. We also came during the weekends on Sunday. We spent about an hour a day working. It was a lot of fun and let us learn something new.
During the first LEGO League, we had to identify a problem within the human water cycle, design a solution that makes this problem better, and share our problem and solution with others. The Flowbots designed a device to be put on showers that tells you how much water you are using to motivate people to take shorter showers.
The Hydro Warriors' idea is to conserve water by installing dual flush toilets around the West Hartford schools.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore, for coming to the class and listening to our ideas. Your suggestions are very helpful.
Teams design, build, program, and test robots using LEGO Mindstorm's technology. The robots are designed and programmed by team members to perform a series of missions during 2.5-minute matches.
The robots are built using LEGO Mindstorm technology. We have to build, program, and test the robots ourselves. We used the EV3 blocks.
This was our robot playing field. In the left-hand corner is where the robot stays. We program the robot to go out and do missions.
These are some of our core values. We are a team. We know our coaches and mentors don't have all the answers. We learn together. What we discover is more important than what we win. And we share our experience with graceful professionalism. And most of all, we have fun.
We learned a lot during the FLL season. For example, we learned how to solve problems with friends and groups of people. We also got to know our groups and the other groups very well throughout the season. We also learned about friendly competition and obviously a ton about technology.
This experience was very inspiring to me. It definitely made me want to move forward with the Lego programming and to keep doing STEM and helping to save water. It also inspired me to build an EV3 block to learn more. And here is a quick video to show you some of the highlights of the season. Any questions?
So can I have one for my shower? Are they ready for production? How do they come out? I mean, the projects really. Did you build robots that you feel like really accomplished what you needed, or you think there needs to be more work?
The robot or the shower thing we made?
Oh, I thought they were connected.
No, we made a robot for the tasks we did on the board, and the shower head was our project, that one. And do flush toilets.
No, right, that's right. So, okay, so one looks really cool and fun, but I'm thinking about the ones that are going to save the world, which is the water stuff. So how do you feel about those? Do you feel like you succeeded, or is there more work to be done? Can we make this into a billion-dollar business?
I don't know, but we would kind of need someone to actually be able to make it because it's kind of complicated and we have no idea how it works.
I got it. But with dual flush toilets, it would actually be pretty easy to install, and it could help us save some money. They are a little pricey, but you can find them on Amazon, and at least if we can start with 1 or 2 toilets per school, that would be amazing.
I think the key is not to buy the Amazon ones, but to get you guys to build them.
I don't think that we have enough expertise to do that yet.
Not yet, that's right. We want next year's presentation to come. Other questions?
Wonderful presentation, young people. Can a couple of you just share something you learned about yourself while working on this project?
I didn't know how fun, I thought doing the project was. I love trying to invent something. It was something I didn't really know about until this year. Like last year when I was involved in FLL, we just sort of designed an app, and I wasn't a big part of that. But this year I really got into the project, and I loved doing it. It was very fun for me, and I did not know this about myself.
I I discovered that it's very fun to program a robot and try to compete in competitions like this.
I learned that it's like fun and that I can do stuff if I actually try. If I try hard enough, I can understand stuff really well, like programming, the robot, which was complicated but then fun.
I learned you'll run into some tough times when you're doing this. I mean, the other team had to restart their robot halfway through the competition, which was not helpful, but even us, we didn't have our project till the first month of it, which was really challenging to get it done.
I definitely learned a lot more about teamwork, working with others, and like the core values that I learned. I had no idea stuff like that. I just didn't know about that, and I learned about those too, and that totally changed me.
I learned that sometimes it's better to work as a team to find a solution. I usually had worked by myself in the past and reluctantly with others, but when we did this project, it was good to be together with a team.
I definitely found out, like, I don't really know that I had so many people supporting me. Like, throughout the competition, there was a lot of hard times, like a lot of disagreements and things where we had to come to conclusions with things, and they turned out great. And those arguments brought friendships closer than ever, and this whole thing has been a great experience. For everything about it was great.
And I think everyone will say this. For the first month, I didn't know half the people on this team's name, and now this brought me so close together with them. Like, I don't know.
Adding on to what she was saying, I'll bet that everybody on both teams learned a lot about everybody else, and that using that, they got through a lot of tough times, and we made it.
Oh, I forgot to mention this in one of the slides, but thank you so much to our awesome mentors, Mrs. Hardesty and Mrs. McCarowitz.
Hey, I wanted to ask, this was a great presentation. It looks like a lot of fun. If some kids at other schools in town saw this and said, I'd like to give this a try, how would you recommend they go about it?
There is a website when you can make teams of 2 or more, and you need to have a coach or a mentor. And it's super fun, and they should definitely try it out. Even if they don't win the first time or they totally screw up, it's super fun.
And it's for all ages, too. Ours was grades 4 through 8. There's also a first robotics competition for high schoolers. And I don't know the name of the younger kids one, but I definitely know. It's First Lego League Junior, and I think that it's good to appeal to all ages.
Well, you learned lessons in this age group that most people don't learn till they're grown up. So thank you so much. This is really, really impressive. And thank you, parents, for sharing your children. As they're making their way out, is there any public communications? Anyone want to say anything? I didn't think there was anybody on the list, but is there anybody who's hoping to make any comments? I take that as a no. Okay. We have no unfinished business, so we're moving to new business, beginning with the presentation of the Capital Improvement Plan, CIP, for 2018-2019. I want to, can I have a motion for that the Board of Education receive the Capital Improvement Plan for 2018-19 and begin the process of reviewing for final approval and adoption at the February 6th, 2018 Board of Education meeting?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye. And now we get to discuss it.
So the CIP, we have Andy Morrow and Bob Palmer here to talk about this. This is the Capital Improvement Plan. Every year gets presented. It's kind of that $4 million that people don't necessarily see, and that's almost the problem with it, is that it's spent on, we have 17 different school sites, 16 school buildings in and of themselves, and the amount of work that it takes to keep them so that any given year you don't have replacement issues. So upkeep, things like masonry that people never think about, but that is a constant cost, in roofing and rotate. So we do this every year. We present it here. This is the presentation. You'll vote on it at the next meeting, and then it goes off to the town manager. So with that said, Andy and Bob.
All right. So yes, as Tom mentioned, this is our CIP identifies the funds that are for the ongoing maintenance, and this is a 12-year plan that we put forward, and so you'll see that this includes up through the fiscal year of 2029-30. And we only, however, fund the upcoming 2 years. And so this is really where the Board of Education, when you go ahead and accept and approve your CIP plan, we operate really as a department under the town of West Hartford, and then this goes to the town manager, and it's folded up into his CIP plan for the entire town of West Hartford. So you'll see there's broad categories that we outline here that are the general maintenance categories that we operate, and then this approval process goes into the town project. So for us here, for the 2 years that we're going ahead and developing, we're requesting for this upcoming year, 18-19, $4,575,000, again in the broad categories. And then in 2019 and 20, a $4.7 million request. Last year, we were reduced in the town's adopted budget by $400,000, and this reduced our interior building improvements by $300,000, which meant that we had to defer a project at KP for their reflooring that we had planned, and we had $100,000 in our CNRE, which are capital non-recurring expenses such as computers and furniture and such. So I'll turn it over to Bob to sort of talk a little bit about what we've done and then what we have planned for the upcoming 2 years.
Okay, so in the adopted budget last year, we always like to talk about what was approved by the Board of Education and what we actually got done. There's always a lot of complications with these projects. They're large, they're complicated, there's architects, there's design issues, there's permitting issues, there's all kinds of different scheduling issues. So there's always a little bit of a shuffling of the deck a little bit. So we talk about the projects that we did get done and what got postponed and what we're planning on doing for next year. So for last summer, we replaced flooring at Brayburn and did some painting in those same areas. And that basically completes the flooring replacement at Brayburn. And that's a long-term program that we started about 7 years ago, replacing flooring especially at the elementary schools, and getting rid of the carpeting and replacing it with hard surface flooring. And that's a very important program, and we'll continue to do that. We have many other buildings that still are not complete, but that's just a good practice in building maintenance. Also improves indoor air quality, and it allows us to actually clean the schools a lot better and have a cleaner, safer environment for our students and teachers. So we also last year at Brayburn, we relocated the kindergarten playground to the back of the school and made some improvements there. We replaced the turf at Conard last year. That was at the end of its life. We did stage lighting upgrades at Conard. We reconstructed the south parking lot at Duffy Elementary, which came out great. We did a lot of work there to elevate and improve the drainage as well as resurfacing. At Morley, we replaced the roof over the library media center and also over the main part of the building. That also included a new air conditioning and heating unit for the library media center. At Hall, we resurfaced and restriped the running track surface, which is a rubberized surface. At Bugby, we painted some classrooms. At Norfolk, we were scheduled to do the entire auditorium seating replacement. We ran into an asbestos abatement issue, so we did that work, and we're planning to come back this next summer to continue that seating replacement. At Sedgwick, we painted the cafeteria. We also did a sound attenuation system there because it's the next project, we relocated the Sedgwick office from upstairs to downstairs, and they utilized that multi-purpose room for cafeteria. So we ended up putting more kids into the cafeteria space, which we anticipated would create a noise issue. So what we did was do some sound improvements there to mitigate some of that added noise, and it actually has been working very well. So going forward, a lot of the same themes that we've seen before for projects, like Andy and Tom had mentioned, it's a continuous maintenance improvement projects. So I've listed them out here by building, and then the fiscal years in which we are planning on completing the work. So at Brayburn in 2021, we plan on replacing the roof. The Bugby office, we plan on being a 2-year project of reconfiguring the office, and that's mostly for security improvements, but also we're looking at ADA accessibility with that and giving them a better floor plan for that office, simultaneous kind of projects. Conard, the visitor bleachers are scheduled to be replaced this summer. That's due to fire code and accessibility issues. We did the home bleachers 2 years ago. This is coming back and doing the visitor bleacher side. The science hoods, there's 3 of them that need to be replaced, again, for accessibility issues. That would be done this summer. And next summer, we would come and do the entrance security, just revising the main entrance a little bit in order to create that situation where visitors are buzzed into the building and they're buzzed directly into the office instead of being allowed into the lobby and then having free access to the building. Duffy, we plan on doing flooring replacements, as I mentioned, and we follow that with painting at the same time. That would be this summer. This summer, we also plan on replacing the E section of the roof at Hall. We'll come back the following year and do additional roofing areas over there. Exact area not yet determined. Probably over the B wing is my guess. We have ongoing masonry repairs at Hall for the next 3 years. That building we're at 45 years old right now, so it's at that point where we're just seeing a need for constant repointing and masonry repairs. We're getting a lot of water penetration through the building. We also plan on doing the sound system in the auditorium this summer. The turf will be replaced in the summer of 2021. Auditorium seating in that same summer. King Philip flooring this summer. We'll also be doing the last phase of the roofing project over there. This is the 3rd phase of the roofing project at King Philip. That will complete that roof. We'll also do painting in coordination with the flooring. The electrical switch gear would be replaced. That actually is next summer. Because we're going to need power this summer to do everything else. So that would be next summer. The switchgear needs to be replaced. It's the original switchgear from 1957, so we got our money's worth out of it. And we also are accumulating funds in each of the next 3 years to do the boiler replacement at King Philip. That system is not the original system, but it's from the I think it's the late 1970s. It's still a steam system. We're going to explore the opportunity there to convert to hot water, which would give us energy efficiency, but it all depends on the engineering and pipe sizes and that type of stuff. So, at Norfolk, we're looking to come back and finish that auditorium seating project that we began last year. We'll come back in 1920 and do some additional flooring on the first floor of the building, followed by painting. We're looking at doing the parking lot next summer in 1819. And we're also looking to make security improvements to the building in the following summer of 20 and 21. Sedgwick, very similar to Hall. We have masonry repairs going on there for the next 3 years. We have some flooring coming next summer, again followed by painting, roof replacement, the main section of the building. That will be a 2-year phased project. And then we'll also come in and do the auditorium seating there in 19 and 20. Smith, we have some flooring to do over there. A lot of that building is still carpeted. And we would follow that with painting. Webster Hill, exterior door replacements. Those were scheduled for last year. We ran into some complications, so we're coming back to finish that this year. We're looking to do some flooring in the following years, along with painting. Whiting Lane Playground, that was a 2-year phase project, and we were accumulating money over each year. I've actually purchased the playground equipment. I'm sitting down at DPW. We're just waiting for the weather to break to install it this summer. So, Wolcott Auditorium lighting would be done 18-19, and then we would look to do some playground improvements there during 19 and 20. So, and also in your packet, we do have an additional category. This was discussed in the last few years when we had excessive heat during September. That 9 of the 11 elementary schools are not fully air conditioned. There's some air conditioning level at all of those buildings. So there was some discussion about beginning the process of looking at and beginning to understand what would be needed to be done to get air conditioning into all those buildings, fresh air and air conditioning. 2 of those buildings, Braeburn and Wolcott, already have fresh air systems. So those are halfway there. But the other 7 remaining buildings do not have modern fresh air systems. They have some fresh air systems, but they're pretty minimal. Most of those buildings, as you know, are from the 1950s, 1960s, not to today's standards, so that's why they just don't have those modern systems. It's something that we've discussed quite a few times with the board. In next year's CIP, there's $100,000 allocated to study the issue and to come up with some type of a solution. They're complicated projects. We really have to do a lot of engineering to figure out what's the best way to get fresh air and or air conditioning into those spaces. But we also have to be conscious of the noise standards. The state has very strict noise standards for classrooms. A lot of the equipment that you see doesn't meet those standards, so the window air conditioners don't really meet that standard. They cause a lot of noise, they're very inefficient, and they don't do anything for fresh air. So, and what also complicates that issue is windows. A lot of our buildings have single pane windows, which are designed to leak air. That's your fresh air system by design. So if we go and put in fresh air and air conditioning systems, we need to address our window issue as well. So that's what drives the price up. And you'll see in the final year, we do have $4.5 million allocated, and that would, we think, cover 1 elementary school, but that's just a very educated guess based on what other towns have done around us at this point. So, so that's really the summary of the projects that we have done and completed. And we want to open it up for questions.
Any questions?
If I could just add one thing, just to put in perspective, you see all these projects, you know, they go to you for approval, then town manager, town council, and then for the projects you see this summer, they've got to be bid out. You've got to put, you know, and we have a very, you know, set process for how we got to go about doing it. And then Bob has to manage all of these in a 10-week period during the summer. So it's an exceptionally busy time. That's why when we say which ones we're going to do, it's always a most likely guess, because if something happens where all of a sudden one product, like asphalt, becomes way cheaper that summer, we may move something up, trade it with something else, or if there's another project going on, we get a double bid. So things happen that change this. This is what we plan on doing, but it's never 100% accurate.
It's never an exact science. If you remember correct, a couple of years back, we had gone for we tried to do the Morley roof and didn't have the right bidding on it, and so we had to defer that and so forth. So there's always a lot of different variables because of, again, we have to open school at a certain date and have to be done.
Bob, I was surprised to see the air conditioning piece in here. I know we talked about it, but I also know we talked about it that you gave us a estimate back in the day as well. And the return on investment wouldn't meet the life standard of the buildings. And I thought that kind of, you know, with one elementary school being 4.5, and with the windows and the air conditioning, literally sometimes the building will outlast the return on, or the expense would last longer than the building. So I just don't know what avenue and rabbit hole we're going down and how much money we're going to spend just even looking at that. But That's kind of what I remember our last, because if you remember, Jay and I visited every school that had a heating issue, and during the heating issue, and it was significant, but they were, mitigating those issues as well, so.
Yeah. And we left that in because, again, the decision last year with the town was to go ahead and propose the study piece, and then it's really then determining if that's then in the out years for adding in the funding.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. This isn't a project, this won't pay for itself. There's a notion always out there when you want to do something good, well, it won't cost anything. No, this would cost more. There is a large part of the community, you all know, when there's a heat, just as we get calls about there's snow or this, when there's 3 days of heat, we get calls about that. And that's something really the board has to decide. So last year, and this is in the out years, you're not approving a $4 million plan here or anything else. This is saying that the board, starting last year, as you recall, wanted to study this and look into it into the future, certainly understanding the fiscal realities of the present day, but that at some point, is this something that we should study and get an idea of what the actual cost would be? So,
Quick question. When you set aside $100,000 to study it, what is that money actually being spent on? Just seems like a big number just to do some studying.
Yeah, it would be engineering, preliminary engineering, conceptual engineering of which systems would, what they would do is go and look at one of the buildings that we would pick for them, and then they would take a look at it and try to come up with an engineering solution, conceptual kind of ideas, cost estimates, that type of stuff. So it probably would be multiple buildings because we would want them to get a look at all of our different types of buildings. We could probably give them 2 or 3 different types of buildings, and they would take a look at those and do some preliminary engineering, trying to figure out the size of the systems and what they think the cost would be, the implications, and then do some exploring on technologies and what types of systems they would want to put in there. Would it be DX cooling, a central cooling plant, those types of things. So it's a rough idea. The 100,000 is a rough estimate of what it would be, but the engineering costs are pretty significant. So it's
and it would go out for bid. It wouldn't be like, oh, we're setting this aside. We take in bids for study and propose what this would be. So we've got to set aside some amount without actually going out for bid.
Okay, but that's legit that you want 100,000 to do that. You want us to say okay to that.
Yeah, that's our rough estimate. And these funds are capital funds, and if they're not all utilized in that area, we have the ability to transfer those funds to other accounts within the program and utilize it for that. And capital funds, unlike operating budget, doesn't go away if we don't expend it right away. It just stays in that account with the town. So we have that money sitting there. Again, we can reallocate those funds to different priorities within our CIP program. So.
And these are funds that are bonded out over
Correct.
years. They're not a direct allocation.
Question similar to that, but in the meantime, while we're, planning to study, what happens to those particular schools in terms of the air exchange and what have you? I know they're older schools, but yet and still our students are still in those schools. So what's happening in terms of how do we address issues that come up until we can figure out how to handle the long-term issues?
If are you asking then what happens if it's hot in those? Okay, well.
Any type of climate things that
Sure,
come up. You and I both know that issues come up while we're trying to figure out how.
Absolutely. And so what we've always done is each of the schools and the principals have a plan for cooling students and for rotating them through. Each of our buildings have sections that are air conditioned, whether it would be the cafeteria or the library. Or certain classrooms, because of special education needs, may have air conditioning. And so we rotate students through those, and we try to make everyone as comfortable as possible when there's emergencies like that are heat.
And it's a good question, Carol. And that's really the difficulty of this, is there is no simple answer. You try to rotate through, you try to make plans on a day-by-day basis. We've done some work with shading, we've done some work with how to create more shadows. The end result is still, and by the way, this is one of those things that's completely up to you. This is does the Board of Education and the Town Council inherently, what's your opinion on air conditioning in all schools? The problem being is it's not just a simple air conditioner. We get people volunteering every year. Well, I'll put an air conditioner in. Well, our power supply isn't built for that. The windows aren't built for that. And so it's really just the question of long term, what are you looking at? Glastonbury did vote to do this. They've just allocated money over the past couple of years. They did a study with the number of days where classroom temperatures are in the 80s and how much it's gone up. That's a discussion for further on down the road. This is really a placeholder to say, okay, well, if you're ever going to study it, we need to actually have something to say this is what we're talking about, not just a general, well, we think 10 million, we think 20 million, because it's not just the engineers to look at, okay, how much would it cost to put in air conditioning? Well, different buildings need different ventilation. They have no ventilation system. And like we said, those windows are designed to breathe. So buildings that we'd be putting it into, now you're doing a window project at that building too. So it's not like a house where you're recapturing windows. You know, you're just not doing that at King Philip. The whole darn building is a window, you know, so.
Before we go to another topic, though, I want to come back to the point that I think you guys are raising, which is, and maybe it's because we're about to have a snowstorm, but if indeed, with current technology, we're really looking at $4 million, let's say $3 million per school, doesn't make any sense for us to do. So if it doesn't make any sense for us to do in current technology, why would we spend $100,000 asking the question of what it's going to cost? And again, I don't mean to to minimize the heat problem, but when we're trying to think about shaving money off of the budget, it seems crazy to spend $100,000 on a project we know we're not actually going to do.
And that's a decision for you guys to make, if that's something.
And this was really a board request.
Yeah, this was a request from last year that we put this study in place. And if that's something that as a board you've decided that we don't want to go ahead and do, that's fine.
It wasn't allocated last year, but it was, we need to look at this into the future. And so it's put there as a placeholder. It can be put in the placeholder in the future also.
So there's a couple of us on the board, and, you know, 50-year-old memory is what it is, but it's still pretty decent, I don't remember saying we need to allocate $100,000. And that discussion, I don't think.
You didn't last year. The allocation was we need to study this in the future.
Right.
So there wasn't an allocation then. At some point, and by the way, I'm fine with putting this off. This is not the thing that I'm saying, damn it, we have to have this now. It's something that comes up with the community. Absolutely up to you.
Right. I do remember, and I think, Bob, you might have even used the 4.5 million previously, and it might have been right around there. I think we used an example of that. Without spending $100,000, in my mind, your expert analysis of between 3.7 and 4.5 million dollars per school makes sense to me. And we can make a decision on that without having to spend an expert telling us the same thing.
Well, if 3.7 to 4.5 with 10 schools, that's a $7 million difference.
Right.
Yeah, but
I use that as an example. But you're only going to 2 schools. So if he looks at 2 or 3 schools, yet that 5th school is going to be $6 million, we're in the same argument again. It's just a matter of a ballpark number.
We
So
were
when you look
looking at 2 or
a
3
car,
classes of schools.
right? But when you look at a car, you're going to spend $40,000, $30,000 on a car. If that car is $80,000, you don't look at it. It's a ballpark. So if we have the parameters, you're going to spend on a car between $27,000 and $35,000. That's what you go to the dealership with. If it's $42,000, you don't do it.
Wait, here's the simple fact is that if this isn't in, it's fine with all of us. If you're going to look at a study, though, Bob's saying this is roughly what it'll cost over years. When you're talking about spending over 10 years, over 20 years, because we're talking about really, the CIP is about what kind of schools, what kind of buildings do we envision for West Hartford Public Schools for the next 20 years. The things we're doing in the out years here, basically none of us are going to be here. I'm just hoping to be alive. Really, the question is, if this is something that's on the horizon, air conditioning at some point, $100,000 is a lot. I'm fine with that, not allocating it. I'm fine with saying this won't happen during our time. That gives me a definite answer to give to parents. But when you're looking at 10 schools, $100,000 to study to get, and I'm not arguing for the $100,000. It's really a matter of semantics. I understand exactly what you're saying. That's what engineering fees are, to get an accurate representation. I mean, yeah, we know this is going to cost millions of dollars. So you're right. If we're saying we're not allocating that, so why would we spend the 100? I'm completely fine with that. But to get an accurate representation, to go in educated, that's why the $100,000 is there.
Right, and I think, I mean, again, part of at least my agenda, my hope as a chair, is that we actually have these discussions instead of saying, oh, yes, we should have these discussions. So I'm hoping we can actually have this discussion now. My feeling, I think what you're saying is exactly what I'm saying, which is, if indeed, let's assume that the low number of 3.7 is right for every school, I'm still not sure that we would ever vote to allocate $40 million to do this project over 11 schools, whatever it is. And if we're not going to do that in the next couple of years, I would say, yes, I understand that a study means it would be $100,000, then let's not spend the $100,000. That's all I'm, and
That's perfectly
so
fine.
if that's, I mean, if that's the conversation, then I guess I would like to throw it open to the rest of the board. It sounds like, at least Mark, you and I, and maybe Rob, agree that maybe this is not the best way to do it, but I want to hear from everybody else if we're actually going to have a conversation so that we can give you some marching orders.
Right, no, I that's my point. Remember, okay, let the record hold that I made up 3.7, but I was giving you parameters. The number that was presented was 4.5, so let's use that number. That's $40 million, $41 million. And that's probably today's money. And if we're going out years, that's 3% GP, so it's a bigger number 10, 15 years from now. So what I'm saying is, what did it cost for us to build Charter Oak, right? And what's it going to cost for us to put air conditioning in some of these schools for really a week or two? By no means am I diminishing the heat that is taking in these schools, but you sometimes, you often, as a responsible taxpayer, you have to be, we work for the town of West Hartford, the taxpayers, and you have to sometimes put on that return on investment hat. Does it make sense? Would you do that in your house? Would you spend more than it would, would you spend, 20 or 50% of your total house value on air conditioning? Those are questions that you'd have to ask, but that's how you return on investment. So yes, my point is, and I'd love to hear the discussion, is that I recommend that we don't go forward with the 100,000 and we use the recommendation of a 4.5 million number that doesn't cost us anything.
I'd like to ask us to consider that we do look at something. I think with Brayburn and Wolcott already having fresh air systems, we owe it to at least look at how much that would cost. And then if we're looking at that, if we do a study for those two schools where you almost, and I'm oversimplifying, but you just got to put an air conditioner and they've got the venting and the air ducts already in there. Then, so if we're doing that, how much would it be then to look at the other schools while we're there? So maybe that could reduce the cost, something as well. We've got to also consider that in addition to just students, we've got employees who work in these buildings. Now, if you work here in Town Hall, it's air conditioned, it's very nice. If you're out in the school, and I need to expand upon that, if I'm down the street in my office, it's air conditioned. It's very hard to get employees to come into a building that's not air conditioned for employment purposes. We're looking to attract and retain the best employees, and if somebody's got a job offer from West Hartford or Glastonbury, and you got to weigh different things. I might get a nice air-conditioned classroom. I know that's simplifying again, but that's something that as a board, this would be a small thing we could do to get the ball rolling, so future boards then could make an intelligent and informed decision. No decision will be made until this study is done at some point. So I'd like to ask that we consider that we at least look at some options for a possible study instead of just shutting it down. Mark, you mentioned about a house, what you do, and it all depends on your view of things. If you've been by my house, I've got a little cape, we got solar panels. And it almost doesn't make sense because we didn't have enough real estate up on top there, but we knew it was something we wanted to do. So for us, once the kids move out, it should then start paying for itself. And perhaps something that the schools could be similar, where something down the road could make more sense. And the study might show us that as well. Bob, I would like to ask one thing. Charter Oak, we did geothermal, never again, or?
Oh, no, we're very pleased with it.
All right.
No, it's working well. It's did fantastic during that cold spell with heating. The air conditioning worked great this summer. It's been working, very few complaints from building occupants about any type of discomfort or anything like that. It's been chugging along very nicely, so very, very pleased so far.
But it's not a practical retrofit for existing
Oh, okay.
buildings. No.
Offhand, do you know why it might not be a practical retrofit?
The piping.
Yeah, the piping issue, you'd have to develop the geothermal field on the site somewhere. So, it was a great opportunity with Charter Oak because we were building from scratch.
And each of the units at Charter Oak are in the sound dampening separate closets, which don't exist in the other buildings, and so.
So I was ready to install at Wolcott. They've got lots of real estate there, but you're right, as far as interior space, okay.
Yeah, anything's possible, but I think it would cost quite a bit.
Okay, thank you.
More than 4.5.
So, Dave, I don't disagree with you. I just want to be clear, if I wasn't, that to spend the $100,000 on the project and getting, say, it's going to cost $4.3 million. So my point is that we have an educated estimate of 4.5, right? And that's what it is. My recommendation is that since we have that number, we make the decision on that number and not spending $100,000 to get 4.25. You know what I'm saying? So I want you to, I'm not saying that we shouldn't make a decision without anything. I think the 4.5 million is a close enough decision-making apparatus. There's a process there that's probably already taken place with an educated engineering, and if it's going to go 4.3 or 4.7, it doesn't. I just want you. A long story, I know, but I think we already have the number to make the decision whether we want air conditioning or not, and I think that's on the table, right? So to get a closer number, to get an exact number, yeah, we could spend the money, but I think we have the information in front of us. And I just want to be clear, I'm not trying to change your decision, I just didn't want to misrepresent my words, that's all.
Understood, thanks.
So first of all, I think we can just solve this by bringing the Smith kids back and having them do the study. They seem ready. So I have a recommendation, and that is that I think it would be helpful to have some information around how hot it gets in some of the classrooms during the hottest times of the year. And I'm wondering if we could put some thermostats in the classrooms if they're not already there.
I presented all that last year.
You already have that
to
data.
the board, and I can certainly pull that information together again. We pulled the average temperatures and the number of days that they were over 80, et cetera, for that.
I think it would be helpful for me personally to see that information and then use that to help inform whether or not we want to fund the study.
And I can send that out to the board again.
Yeah, I feel like if it's 1 or 2 days, then that's a completely different situation than if it's 10 or 11 or 15 or 20 days. Thank you.
I'm just wondering if what I would also like to hear, I remember that list, but since that list, you have done some of that mitigating stuff you're talking about with the curtains and stuff like that. It would be interesting if you know how much difference that did make. Because if that did make an appreciable difference, even if not enough of a difference, maybe an alternative is to do more of those things. It wouldn't solve the problem, but it might ease the problem in a lot less expensive way.
And we do that wherever we can identify it. Again, we don't have before and after data as far as, on this day it was this temperature and on this day it was, but we do have certainly observational data.
That's all we can do.
Sure.
Again,
Sure.
And this is, by the way, this is really helpful. This is the kind of thing you should be doing and talking amongst yourself about this. Our capital improvement plan that we put forward last year didn't all get approved by the town as it goes through. There are cuts almost always made. I guess the question, this was put in the out years out there as a statement because it had come before the board enough times that this is something that was an out year goal with no funding attached to anything. Now is the first time there's funding attached. You could remove funding and put it out, or you could pull the whole thing all together, which is something that you should discuss and you should vote on, because it's, as we say, it's that kind of, 10, 20-year thing about what kind of investments, because it's just meeting, got consumers meet what they want, yeah.
Again, you're saying 20 years out, and we have, or a board that looks similar to us, will have decisions of closing schools in the near future as well.
I don't think that's a definite. That's always said as if it's a definite.
Well, no, but I said could
another
consider.
board in that time is going to have questions about adding schools and classrooms again, because we know populations do that.
I'm only going by the information that's provided with the declining enrollment in the next 15
Nothing
years.
we've provided has said we'll be closing schools.
No, I'm not saying that. I said a future board may have to consider that.
Sure.
And with the declining enrollment that is forecasted with this information that we're provided. So the next 15 years, declining enrollment exists per so that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying this board's going to discuss it, but a board may discuss that. So again, when you're talking about spending money and for a 20-year plan, that all has to be considered as well.
Andy, if we could go back for a moment, you mentioned about a study and average classroom temperatures. I think of Morley and the west-facing wall. So average temperatures don't really work there because one side is nice and cool and the other side. Do you have a little more granular data that could help us understand?
No, what we presented in the past and what I can pull together is the number of days over a certain temperature each year. So the number of days that we were over 85 degrees or 80 degrees each of the school years. And
Okay, that's
usually,
the
again,
weather you're talking
it's a
about?
handful of days in June and usually a handful of days at the beginning of the school year.
Yeah,
But as far as
we are more interested in what's the temperature in the classroom where the
Okay, well,
children
again,
are.
we don't have historical data on classroom temperature. If that's something that the board's interested in, we can certainly start collecting that. The issue is going to be then looking at it's a catch and catch can as far as, this room might be 85 degrees, but this room, since they pulled the shade down early in the morning, is lower, and we can certainly look at that, but it's not going to help you make a decision between now and February.
But
for the CIP.
maybe not between now and February, but it actually would help in a way, because if a classroom can actually decrease its temperature by 5 degrees if they pull the shades in the morning, then we ought to just
And we
suggest
do.
that people, and I'm sure you do, I'm not
Absolutely,
saying what a
we
new
do.
idea.
Sure.
I'm just saying that there may be ways before we
There's always ways.
do
And
this.
we always, again, you'll remember when it's an exceptionally hot spell, we will have custodian staff that will come in early and draw air through the building to try and cool it off with the early morning air. The difficulty you're going to run into is there's always going to be buildings and there's always going to be classrooms when there's extended heat periods that are going to be hot. And that's why we rotate those students through areas that are cooled. Regardless of the shading we put in place, regardless of the supports we put in place, there's going to be buildings that are hot. And I mean, that's just the nature of older buildings.
So going back to my recommendation, we could try to get some data on internal temperatures in the classrooms this spring and push this decision off, or push this funding off until next year's. Is this how that could work?
You wouldn't have anything to compare it to.
Well, I don't need anything to compare it to. It'd just be for information purposes.
You wouldn't be able to push this off. This is a question. You can take this off of
That's
the
okay.
allocation.
We could take it off this year, and next year at this time, using the data that we've gathered in May and June and maybe September, we could then make an informed decision based on that for future years. Just an idea.
It's something we can do. It's not, I mean, we can have the custodians doing that. It's a task. We can certainly do that. It will take some time, and it will, I mean, it's something else it's fine to do. I mean, generally, when places go through it, it's about what's the average temperature outside, because we'd have to do every classroom and really get a look at every classroom, so it's fine.
Could I say something? I just feel like we're sending our administrative or custodial staff down a rabbit hole with this, because I think we're obscuring the fact that we're asking them to do all these things. You know, first of all, $100,000 to me is a lot of money, period, end of decision. I would never support it. And the idea of spending $4.5 million or more dollars to cool each school, I would never support it. I don't think there's any significant return. And when we have middle school auditoriums, like the one Dave and I visited at Sedgwick, that are in disrepair, maybe it would be a better bang for the buck. And I think that's, as a board, what we should be thinking about. I think probably building on Mark's point that, you know, when you're only getting a use of a few weeks out of such a huge investment, when yet there are auditoriums that are just not functional, that they want to use all the time. That's why I want to get out to more schools, because I'm just learning about the needs. It's like, what do they really need? I mean, sure, air conditioning would be nice. Nobody wants their kid to sweat. Mine are going through it right now. We're at that phase of life. But, you know, you grin and bear it. And you're like, son, I went through it when I walked up to school, hill to school in 6 feet of snow, you know, when I was in school.
Both directions.
Both, all three. And so in all seriousness, I just could never see why we would ask our staff to put so many man hours into all these things we were just talking about with temperature and room and whatever. And it's always going to be a no, isn't it? I mean, how could we really seriously sit here in the current funding environment we exist, which I don't see changing as we have declining enrollments and other issues we're going to face down the road that are going to impact our budget, to put money towards that? Like, if anything, we should take this money and put it towards real needs. And I don't think this is a real need. And I'd rather save their efforts for other purposes.
I have to say, I know that we're going to disagree on lots of funding things, but on this one, I completely agree. There are things that are important. I'm not saying that this isn't important, but I think you're right. Even if the study showed it would be $2 million per school, we're still talking about $25 million. And we could build pools, I think, for less money than that.
No pools, but no.
Oh, never mind. Okay. Sprinkler systems. My point is
We'd
that
have a great swim team.
No, that's true. I absolutely agree with you. But that's your decision
Right.
as a board to remove that from.
right.
From
No,
the
that
outcome.
exactly. So, I mean, I know that you said we should vote for it. Is that the sort of thing we literally vote for now, or do we give a sense of the body?
It's in the
to
adoption. You've got time till the next.
You just
meeting to
direct us
adopt
to
it.
remove it from there, and we would remove it from them what you're adopting at the next board meeting.
So you
Okay,
could
so-
direct us at this point to remove it if people wanted to do that, and that would be fine. I mean, this doesn't need a vote or anything like this at this point. 'cause
Well, but I don't want to direct you to take it out unless we have agreement on the board. So that's why I'm saying I don't want to take a formal vote, but I want a sense
but
that
if you have
everybody.
agreement, you can absolutely.
Right. So. Right.
We're not voting on a line item here. This is just, we would, I guess, the budget would, or the vote would go, we accept the CIP with the exception of the $100,000, and then we would vote on that.
You could do it that way, or we could be directed tonight to take it out of the final CIP presented before you.
Right, but I don't want to
because
take.
we
I don't
don't
want
have
to.
agreement on
I don't
that.
want to
Okay,
direct.
you know.
I don't want to direct anybody to do that until we have a sense from everybody.
No,
mean,
I
the three of
understand.
us agree, but I don't. Not. It's not. Absolutely.
Right, so Cheryl, is that a vote, or is it a?
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I think we could either make a motion or do this informally. But first, there are several people who. I know Dave is not in favor of this, but I haven't actually heard from the other
Inherently,
of
actually,
you.
now that I think about it, this is, that you've received this, so I would say it would be a part of the vote next time to remove anything individually. Now that I think about it, that would be the formal process.
So your vote next time would be that for 18-19, you would approve 4.575 million, and for 19-20, you would approve 4.7 million instead of the 4.8. That would be your vote for next time.
Right, but I think, I mean,
If that's
I
what you
think
decide.
no, that's right. And I think for a clean process, the way we should do it would be to put the motion out there and then have a second motion that says we accept the budget without this line, rather than.
That's fine.
But in the interest of having all our conversations public, I don't want to stop it now and then next time vote. I want to finish the conversation, even if it's going to go on forever. Sorry about that. Viewer public. So if you don't mind, I actually would like to hear what the rest of you think, even if we don't know yet, to just keep the conversation going.
Wonderful, thank you. And I appreciate the fruitful discussion. And I have a food for thought question that may relate more to the welfare of the young people. So recognizing the different times that you intervene with the shades and the temperature and things of that sort, do you account for humidity in the buildings? At times it may be a lower temperature rather, but the humidity may be higher. How do you respond in that way?
If we don't have air conditioning, we don't have a way of reducing humidity. So the humidity would migrate into the building through what existing fresh air is there, and there's no way to deal with it. So if it's humid outside, it's going to be humid inside as well. Not quite as humid, but it'll still be humid.
So my question is, and I know we've tossed this back and forth, in terms of the time of year and the period of time that this heat affects the students, what actual, I guess in terms of days, or maybe, I don't know if it's weeks, because it's usually maybe towards the end of May and into June and maybe part of August. September seems like it begins to start to cool down. So is there a number in terms of average,
Carol,
you would say, over a period of time that this affects the students and staff?
I can share the data that we pulled together last year. I'm trying to picture it in my head. I believe we're talking on average between, say, 6 to 10 days per year that are considered excessively hot. Really, you're talking about, and it's a hit or miss. If this year we really didn't have any heat going into the start of the school year.
Right.
We've had previous summers that have blended into October. It seemed, and we've had excessive heat in September even. We last year didn't really have a lot of heat going into June. We had a couple of days, but it's usually when the days build upon one another that we're not able to dissipate the heat overnight in the classroom buildings, and that's really when it becomes an issue. It's a hit or miss proposition for us, and like all the other districts and all the other schools, we're really at the whim of nature when it comes to that.
This is something, it's really kind of one of those paradigm shifts culturally, in that we've become a culture that lives in air conditioning now. This is something we deal with, we struggle with. I'm the last one that wants to be known as the wuss who wants to air condition every classroom. Kids will tell you I'm tough. It's one of those things that this is during those hot spells, the emails you get. When people talk about this is the optimal, you're not creating an optimal environment. I actually would love it to be either in or out, so I could just say to people, this isn't happening. We're done with this conversation, because it comes up all the time. It is a shift. We will get calls tomorrow, tonight. Why didn't you cancel school tonight? We need notification. Nobody used to cancel school the night before school. It never happened. It never happened when I was doing it 6 years ago. Now it's becoming routine, and I got complaints last week that we didn't let people know early enough because it was 7:30 the night before already. And we're in a position tonight where, we've got a forecast that looks like it'll be tough to go to school. But we also know that there's an underlying forecast that says it might be 0 to 2 inches. And we won't know that till 4 a.m. So you kind of deal with how people...
Grace just lost it there for
I
a
know.
moment. I'm
Sorry.
sorry. The look on Grace's face just had to...
But it's also an issue in terms of I used to get far more calls complaining when we canceled school. I used to get way more. Now I don't tend to get calls when we cancel school. It's basically, okay. I mean, that is a dramatic shift, Andy, and I can tell you from 5 years ago. Society's shifting ways. You have a board policy that says, Terry Schmidt's out there, that Terry was an architect of, that says we will be in school, and basically says at all costs we'll try to get into school. I'm not sure if that went to vote for you, if it would be the same way, because we will get calls on those hot days that says, why aren't you canceling? Other districts are canceling. And that is... We do see cancellations. We see early dismissals those hot days. Those are the kind of things, and this is not an argument for air conditioning. It's a question about, okay, these are things that you need to talk about and think about as you go forward.
I just want to add that I just based on the period of time, unless that window begins to affect the health of our students and our administrative staff and teachers and whatnot, I don't think that that is a good use of spending that kind of money for that short period of time. It's almost like, some of the arguments you said in terms of your house or what have you. And sometimes you have to suffer through it. And then, there's other seasons where, hey, it's like 70 right through the time that you get out of school. So in terms of my thoughts, I don't think it would be cost effective, and I don't think that it would hurt a whole lot of people if we just deal with it for that, those few weeks or what have you. And especially if we have an Indian summer, it doesn't usually last, a long time, and we are able to handle it. I mean.
Pardon me, one last point to piggyback off of what you shared, and as I learn how things have been done in the past as well, on those days when it is quite warm, what, if any, accommodations are made to help students to be hydrated throughout the day?
That's part of each principal has a plan as well to make sure that students are hydrated, to make sure that they're into cool areas and that they're rotating through during the day. So it's something that each of our principals at the elementary level are aware of.
Give you examples like popsicles go into the schools, waters, a lot of
Some
PTOs.
schools.
Well, PTOs kind of handle that, and different schools do different things, but just some of the examples. There are fans with ice trays in front of them that I've seen, all kinds of mitigating things to help with the kids. So there are, it's not like nothing happens. The temperature goes up, the principals do that, the PTO gets involved. There are things that happen.
If I may, in the interest of providing voice to what appears to be a minority opinion here, just again, look at Town Hall. On those hottest days, would we ever consider turning off the air conditioning in this building? Probably not, Would the administration be willing to go out to some of those schools and work for a day in the school, for example? Show moral support, get out there with the troops, as it were. I think that's something to keep in mind.
We do.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. And, keep in mind that there is refuge for some, and some schools do have the air conditioning. And, just as an example, it's very difficult for the schools, and I'm going to use names of schools just here as an example, but Charter Oak is a brand-new school. And it's difficult for teachers to see that and all the benefits that are there that were well-needed and well-deserved after they put up for a long time with that building from 27? I've lost track now.
31.
31, thank you. That place was falling apart. And, so that was well-deserved. And when we made the new building, with all the best stuff. And then we've got other people who are doing their darndest every day in these difficult working conditions from time to time. And again, when I go to my private business office that I go to, it's air conditioned. They just refurbished it. We're getting new chillers on all of them. Of course, that's the private sector, I understand. But I think to have a study, at least get something going, to have it on record for a future board to make an informed decision, not something based on an estimate. And again, looking at Brayburn and Wolcott, where it just might be really economical to slide something in there, I think it'd be worth it to at least take a look at that.
Let me just give you a number, just so sometimes people are numbers. 11 days I took the highest number, divided by over 20 years. So for every day that it's hot for 20 years, it's going to cost the town $20,454 per school for 20 years. Over 20 years, it's going to cost $20,454 a day for those 11 days. That's for one school. That's time nowadays. It's going to times 10 schools. Just to give you a number.
I'm sure that you all have already thought of this, so if you already have this information, feel free to share. But could we do a different kind of a study that isn't about air conditioning, which seems like something that's unlikely to be approved in our lifetimes, to be honest, but one that looks at alternative methods of cooling that are less expensive? So what would it cost to do ceiling fans and the electrical work that would be necessary in order to ensure that ceiling fans worked in every classroom? How much would it cost for shades and/or curtains, the right kind that are helping to conserve energy and keep it cooler. So alternative ways of cooling the classrooms that are more likely to be approved. Is that something that we could study for less than $100,000, do you think?
If that's something that you'd like to go ahead and look at, absolutely. Part of that was, part of the study was not simply air conditioning. It was looking at ventilation, it was looking at window structure, it was looking at different methods, whether that would be, as you mentioned, a combination of ceiling fans, et cetera, as different venting as well.
And that, we're going to keep doing that.
Sure.
No matter what. I mean, we have, it actually, like I said, this is the discussion we need to have, because then it gives us a message going forward. Okay, this was in response to requests that kept coming in. So if we know we're not going in that direction, then that's exactly what we do. And those are the kind of things you don't need to study in the same way. I mean, yeah, electrical grid, there's some questions with that kind of thing, but otherwise, no, you'd be buying those things. I mean, we do have blinds, we do have those things, but the right ones, those kind of questions, sure, those are things to look at.
Can I just ask, factually speaking, I think Deb's absolutely right, but I thought we were already doing that.
Yeah,
I mean, we already
Yes,
had, we had already looked into the right kinds of shades and the
Absolutely.
lowering and the automatic
Absolutely.
stuff.
And we'll
so-
continue to.
Because I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and we continue to.
we should continue. I mean, I thought that was sort of, that's a given.
Yeah, I mean, I guess here's the only, I don't want to give false hope about
It's still gonna be hot.
shading, ceiling fans. You get 3 days that it's, realistically, I won't even use above 90. You get 3 days where it's 85 and it's humid at night. The issue is, if it's never cool at night, you don't get the cool air into the building. So on the third day, it's going to be hot, kids are going to sweat. On the second floor at Duffy, I was always happy to have my kids on the second floor at Duffy, because then people couldn't say, you don't know how hot it is, because I'm like, no, my kid's in that classroom, I know exactly how hot it is. So certainly there are areas in the district that are hotter than others, but yeah, we'll continue doing that, that's exactly right.
Okay, so we have two ways to go, and I am open to this. One is to simply vote now, to ask you to take it off the table. And the other is so can I ask whoever draws this up that we have two motions next time? One is to take it off, and, the two different amounts, so that if there's, go ahead.
I think just for parliamentary, I think we just need one. Either it goes without it or it goes forward with it. There's not two votes, really. There's one vote. So if those in favor of removing the 100,000 say aye, and then it gets removed, or it does not, and then if it doesn't.
Oh, sure, but that's
then-
the second vote. Right, so one is, do we remove it? The second is, do we approve the number? We have to vote once on the budget. So all I mean is that we need a vote specifically on whether or not we would remove it. But you're absolutely right. But so we should do it next time, so if we can. Good?
Could I ask a clarification, just so that we know for your motion? Removing the 100,000, you'd also like to remove the out years of the estimate?
Of the 4 million?
Yes. Okay.
We'd be so happy to see that number come way down.
The one thing I do want to add to this presentation for the viewing public, because a question comes up and comes in, especially with visible things. So the visible thing that's most often seen is the turf field. And you'll get questions, well, why is Conard's replaced and Hall's is 2 years later? The answer is usage. We try really hard to make sure things are equal. That being said, we also don't do equal just to make some mythical fairness, because the Conard turf field was torn. It was ripped. It gets a far heavier usage. It gets a more damaging usage. The boys lacrosse league is at the Conard site. There's been more damage to it over time. The Hall field, for whatever reason, it has just been in better shape. So just as we're not doing it immediately just because, well, we did at the same time, so we'll do this. I mean, we're not proposing a science lab at Conard either. I mean, the benefit of 11 elementary schools is they don't really compare themselves to each other. The problem with 2 high schools is each one looks at the other. So I just wanted that out there as an understanding point.
Can I just say thank you for doing that, because that will segue into, are there other questions or comments about the report?
Yeah, so I'll build off of that and ask, so just to take a giant step backwards, how this list gets put together. Who is involved in looking at each school, determining what the needs are, and then determining which of those needs makes this priority list?
Sure. So Andy, myself, and Chip typically bring the list together, but with input from principals, athletic directors, other department supervisors throughout the district who make requests to us. And then we take that list and we prioritize it. So, and based on the allocation. So it's a process where we reach out to principals or they reach out to us, and it's really about the highest needs just rising to the top. There's lots of things that we don't get to that we would like to get to. It's competing for the limited resources that we have to do these things.
And there's some things that don't get brought forward necessarily, but Bob and custodians and people in the know, like repointing buildings, people rarely say we need masonry work. They want the things that everybody can see. I want the things everybody can see, because then you're like, that's where your money goes. The repointing is just the biggest example of a big cost item. Masonry is expensive, but if you don't do it, you're bringing way bigger costs in the future. So.
Right, and those are just maintenance activities that really just protect the exterior shell of the building, which protects water from penetrating into the building, causing future damage. So we're really just protecting the asset, really. So those are the types of things. And then there's other things in here of playground improvements, and those are all really based on need. We listen to what people are saying, we take a look at things, and we just prioritize based on that. And unfortunately, we just can't get to everything all the time, and we have to. And it's really need based. We're not doing things in here that are making glory here. So,
how often does the principals evaluate the building?
I would say constantly. We're in constant communication with the principals and with Bob's staff and working through the needs of the different buildings.
You don't have a choice, because it's what you're
And that's
always
why I'm
getting
asking.
the calls
Because
about,
that is every day, and I know like when a major storm is coming, like you said, if something, the storm has taken off something, so this is a constant thing that the staff is doing on a regular basis to make sure things are intact.
And things change, that's not to say that something won't come up between your adoption of this and this summer where we feel it's a bigger priority because of something that happens in one of the buildings, and we have to go ahead and reallocate for that. We have to deal with different emergencies as they arise, whether it be roofing, whether it be electrical, whether it be something of that nature.
Can I just then ask you directly about that? So, because I was going to ask, this is a 2-year approval that we're doing, but of course we're only budgeting for 1 year. So this is sort of wishful thinking plan, and then next year we come back and say, well, okay, now we're going to budget for 2 years.
the council will. You are recommending a 2-year approval plan, and the council will fund 2 years.
Okay.
So, but again, things will change a little bit, perhaps in our prioritizing. We might shuffle the deck a little bit as to some of it's scheduling, design, that type of stuff. So things might change a little bit, but we do try to stick to the plan as best we can.
So, Deb, that same question came up a couple, 3 years ago, and Jay and I sat here with this book, and we ended up going to every school, line item by line item, and went through and like, okay, show me the gym floor, show me the boiler. Jay got sick of looking at boilers, but I got an engineering background, so I like that stuff. But we actually went through and okay. And almost always, every line item made a lot of sense when you look at it. It was enlightening, and I encourage anyone else to do it too. And we also went during the hot days and went into the schools where they were hot as well. So, if you have the time and the inclination to get out there and look at some of these CIP, it's an educational. I was fortunate to have 3 kids in 3 different schools at a time, and you know what? You're at the schools all the time, so you kind of know. Oh yeah, that's that. But it's enlightening when you go to a school that you have no idea about. Like the Duffy parking lot was a nightmare for so many years, but I didn't really know that. And, a lot of us didn't until you visit it. So
It'll be like the West Hartford Historical Homes. We'll put together a tour of historical boilers in town if you'd like, and you'll all be invited. It's a.
This is the key to, you look at the education, it's a good joke. You look at the history of our buildings and the age of our buildings, yet overall the shape that they are in and how they're maintained. And we need to thank the people that came before us that did allocate to the CIP to make sure, because the CIP is the easiest thing to cut in any given year. Because if you cut it at in 1 year, you won't really notice it that year necessarily unless it's an emergency thing. But it's penny wise, pound foolish.
And also like to thank all of Bob's people. They do a fantastic job on day-to-day
Unbelievable.
to really shepherd our resources well.
And can I also say creatively? I mean, I remember even just in the painting, there was an issue about you couldn't paint at the same time that the school was on, and so but you reorganized people's hours. I mean, it was really
We
smart.
moved folks to a second shift as well. And
Yeah,
they've
it was
been great
just a
about
very
that as
smart
well.
way to reallocate to meet the same needs. So, other questions, comments, thoughts, kudos?
About the budget in general, like the whole budget, or just the?
No, the CIP.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean about
Oh, yes.
other areas of the CIP.
Yes, we're now open to all conversations.
So if we can shift away from cooling and heating, I think we beat that one to death. I had a question about the, again, maybe this is just being a new guy, but I was looking at the sheet related to the Board of Education computer infrastructure, which is page 2 on the yellow section. And it's the allocation that is $350,000 a year every year for Infinity. Could you explain that a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah, that's part of the CNRE, and that's simply our refreshment that are put in place each year for schools. Computers are unfortunately an item that expire when we talk about Chromebooks, when we talk about iPads in schools, when we talk about desktop computers, as well as other infrastructure that are smart boards in the classroom. These things have a shelf life and they have a replacement cost, and so this is a budget that goes to replenish that technology really backbone of the schools on a year-to-year basis.
So furthering down that road, like it says in here in your description justification that there's certain state of Connecticut requirements. Is that true? Because like you have a 3 to 5 year life
That's the
expectancy?
assessment requirements that we do. All
Oh,
of the
just-
state
okay.
assessment is done now on computers as well, and so we make sure that we have to have machines that are of a recent age in order to support the software and the assessment support for that.
So is this a real number that we spend every year, or are there years that like we only spend half or 2/3?
No, that's
or?
a real number that we spend every year, and oftentimes we spend more.
Yeah, it's down from a few years ago when we had so much work to do to catch up. We had so much infrastructure work with fiber network, with, we finally gotten to a place. 5 years ago, the number one complaint that we got was about internet access in classrooms and computers in the classroom and everything else. This is really purely maintenance. This isn't adding things. This is just what it requires with, 9,500 kids, number of devices, and the classroom devices on top of it.
Okay. I mean, because I don't have the historical knowledge you guys do. It just seems that it would maybe not always be like that type of number, even if that's a number that's reduced over time, because if it's going to more than just like laptops, it's going to this other things besides computers. It's the whole computer infrastructure. Okay. Guess I thought for a minute it was just like everybody's getting a new laptop every 2 years. So.
No.
That would be nice.
Although the thing to remember is that, you think of your laptop, your usage or whatever, and how long it lasts, and then multiply it by all those kids using it continuous, and maybe not always taking care of it in exactly the same way you do. And so those are we do probably burn through them a little bit quicker.
Yes, one more question I had. We mentioned the Morley roof earlier. Is that finally done? We're done?
Yep.
Just punch list items, a few little minor details to finish, but for the majority, it's done.
Great
Yes.
news.
Yep.
And I would like to say I had a chance to visit Morley earlier in the year and had forgotten that we were going to do flooring, and I was getting unsolicited comments on how happy they were with the flooring, and that's just great news. Thank you.
They're also happy the roof works.
Exactly. Other questions, comments? We will have another chance to grill you next time. I'm sure you're looking forward to that. But thank you very much. And I made an error before by making you vote on it. I should have just had the question. So now we're going to vote again on accepting that we accept the report to that we receive it and reviewed it as appropriate in order to adopt a give final approval at the February 6th, 2018 Board of Education meeting. That was already moved and seconded, so all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Since we already got it, I think we're good.
And
Okay.
Cheryl, if I could just add, during this 2-week period in between meetings, if something comes up on something like that and you just have a quick question or information, go through Cheryl, come to me, and we'll get it either back to you or know that that's information you're looking for at the next meeting, so that's fine. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much for putting up with all of our conversation and questions. Okay, moving along. Sorry, what?
I'm sorry, Carol and I were having a sidebar trying to figure out what CNRE stands for.
Capital non-recurring expense.
Thank you.
Of course.
Capital non-recurring expense.
Sorry, okay. Next, we move to the adoption of the annual board meeting schedule for 2018-2019. And I just want to clarify, because I didn't realize, we're only voting on the dates of the schedule. We're not voting on the topics or anything like that. So that we can have a conversation, can I hear a motion that we receive and revise as appropriate the proposed annual board meeting schedule so that we can adopt a final meeting calendar in 2018-2019 year?
So moved.
Second.
Good enough. Discussion.
Just as you see in front of you, the only thing that really stands out other than a couple of Wednesdays is September 19th would typically be a board meeting night. That is Yom Kippur, which would start the Tuesday the night before, so that kind of takes that week out of it. So that's why that doesn't occur as a board meeting night.
I have a question. Every year, we put a January 2nd date for the board workshop,
That is
and
the
every time
absolute placeholder.
we always say it
It's-
as a placeholder. Could we just put it in another day as a
Just put it
placeholder?
as a January general.
Yeah,
I
just
can-
because it seems really fixed, and then people get all agitated if they can't miss it, and if they can't make it, and it would be easier if we said, put it at the 10th. I don't care when we put it, but putting it the 2nd then sets people off in December when they forget that it's just a placeholder. So I'm just wondering if we can put something more vague in there.
Sure, I'm wondering how to do it now. If you want to move,
Well-
just have a motion to move it to a different date, that's fine.
We could, we're just meeting to revise as appropriate, exactly the same way. We're not voting on it till next time.
Oh, yep, you're correct. That's fine. I can change that, sure.
And I actually just have one other question, which is just to make sure the school calendar, that's just here for us, for our reference. That's not, we're not voting on
Not
that.
voting on that, that's just so you know when they're falling in comparison to the school year.
Great, thank you. Other questions, comments?
I guess I'm going to be the voice of dissent tonight. This is fun for me. January 2nd, yeah, that's tough, but we're asking all our children to come back to school on January 22nd, be ready to study and ready to go. Our meeting will probably be moved. I understand it's a placeholder, but I'm just a little concerned about the visual, the message that we might be sending by making this change. We expect our students to be here. I think as responsible members, we should be here as well.
That would be fine, except that it is a placeholder, so it's never actually happened. So I hear what you're saying, but, and we can keep it as a placeholder. I don't care. I'm just saying, and were you thinking of something? Okay. I have something to say. That's right. I don't care when it is. Well, but that is part of it, is that when you have kids from college who are not going back to school yet, it is a different kind of calendar, and so there's just saying. However you want to, if you can change it and it doesn't look really weird, I would still like it. If you think it's a bad optics, we can just all agree that it's a placeholder. So.
Agree. Let's leave it on the 2nd.
Okay, so everybody, mental note, this is a placeholder. In next December, no panicked phone calls, because we're all good. Okay, any other comments or questions about the calendar? Okay, then, all in favor of accepting this presentation so that we can act next time and adopt a final meeting calendar, please say aye. Opposed? Okay. Why don't I see the oh, there it is. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to staff recommendations and reports. First, we hear from our beloved superintendent.
Thank you. We'll see how beloved at about 6 in the morning tomorrow.
That's why I said it, just to make a little cushion
Yes.
for you.
Good news, actually, just in today. Jessica Blitzer called me and let me know Abby Esposito, a Conard teacher, and her genocide studies course actually applied for a grant and received the grant from the Mohegan Tribe Challenge Grant Program, which includes $1,000 to fund educational material plus days of study at the Mohegan Museum, including with educational experts from the Mohegan Tribe to work with our students there. So congratulations to Abby. It was a great, well thought out grant that she wrote. So exceptionally well done. In your board packet, and this will be available on our website, and this is really Shalice Ross puts this together with Ann McKernan. I included our annual report, which you'll see us refer to continuously, and it's going to appear in some other reports, but I didn't want it to get lost because our home language report, which we do every year and is one of the hallmarks of West Hartford Public Schools, and one of the things that is so important and one of the reasons that so many of us have chosen West Hartford is where we want to send our kids. The number of students with a home language last year in West Hartford Public Schools, other than English, rose slightly to 22.2% from 21.3% the previous year, 20.5% in 2015. We go up 1% a year in this, almost universally every year. And just to put in perspective, and remember this when we look at scores and everything else, and then look at us compared to every other district. 74 different home languages spoken this year, up from 72 last year. Just a remarkable testament to the tapestry of this town. And I say that in reflection of yesterday being Martin Luther King Jr. Day, ceremonies here, the involvement of our students, involvement of our classrooms, and really West Hartford standing for integration, welcoming, and the dignity of every child and their home language. Really kind of fascinating. The 6 largest groups, Spanish, Vietnamese, Mandarin, Portuguese, Nepali, and Arabic, which I think when we look further at the list and you look at what existed a few years ago, what were the most popular languages, it's just kind of fascinating that Nepali, if you go 10 years ago, there were 35, 43 speakers. Now it's 102 Nepali speakers. And then you see shifts with other languages like Russian who've gone from a high down to a low. And you can, anybody that's a history, demographics person, tracing migration patterns, this is just fascinating stuff. But it's something that you'll hear us refer to it throughout the year. So I want to call your attention to include that report. So with that, that's that.
Questions, comments? 74 is, by the way, the highest ever, as far as I can tell, which is so cool. Dem?
I think this is fascinating, and I really appreciate your providing the historical perspective as well. I'm wondering how we reach out to the parents of these students. I know translation services are quite expensive, and it's possible that some of these families do also speak English, just not perhaps their preferred language. So how are we reaching out to the families that speak a different language at home and making sure that the families also feel welcome in our school communities to participate at the same level that the students hopefully do?
Yeah. It's a great question, something that our, that Shalice and our ESOL department works continuously on, but really every school, and trying to meet with families. It's so great when teachers and administrators multilingual can actually have that conversation. However, their language, Tagalog, it's not probably going to be something everybody here speaks. So there are some languages where you see kind of blooms in different schools. A couple years ago, we translated in one school not just into Spanish, everything that went out, but also Vietnamese because we had a bloom there. One of the things is reaching out to that community. The Nepali community we've partnered with in so many ways and had so many discussions. Really, that family community has come together to help work with us with translation. Google Translate, we all know, isn't a great translator. It doesn't work great. However, for some languages, it is better than nothing because we wouldn't be able to find a translator for that language. So we do everything we can to make sure that we know our kids. And what honestly happens a lot is that the children are the translators as we meet with the parents and the families, and the children also bridge that gap. So.
I just want to say, as someone who twice was in the situation of not being able to speak the local language, but I had to rely on my children, it's actually an incredible learning experience for the kids. Honey, you have to answer the phone. I don't speak Finnish, and they're like, oh, no. It's really amazing. And in that sense, it's a great gift to children and their learning. Nevertheless, again, speaking as a parent who had to help with homework, and it took me 3 hours to translate it and 15 minutes to help do it, it's absolutely a struggle. So the more that we can do, the better. So thank you. Other comments? Okay. Then we move on to the second staff report, which is about teaching religion. Mr. Vicinius, Ms. Jones, Ms. Blitzer, and Ms. Callan will come up and report to us.
This is one of my favorite reports that we do and talk about because this is where I would brag, yes, we are better. I see things happen in other places, and I'm like, that just would not happen here. And it's something that we get complaints about no matter what. Anytime you teach religion, there are some members of the community that will say, that shouldn't be taught. You shouldn't be. And yet the board has supplied us with a policy that's clear. We have educational experts, and Jessica will go through her work nationally recognized in our partnership with so many groups that I'll actually let Paul and everybody else take over.
Well, thank you. I'm extremely excited to introduce this panel tonight for two important reasons, and then I'll very quickly turn it over to the experts. But the first of which is because of the expertise of this panel in front of you. I think you as a board either know Carrie directly or know her by reputation, and she'll be able to speak to different aspects and different vision relative to how it impacts K through 5. But I'm extremely excited to introduce two new faces that you may be less familiar with. To my in between Carrie and I have Ashley Callan, who is our pre-K to 5 townwide curriculum specialist for both English language arts and social studies. And I have
If I could, before you go on from Ashley, remember the book that I presented that was written? That's Ashley.
And alongside her, I have Jessica Blitzer, who's one of our two 6 through 12 townwide department supervisors for social studies. And aside from the work and the instructional leadership that they provide us in those venues, as Tom alluded to, they have become leaders not only for the state of Connecticut, but they've left a footprint realistically at a national level, and it's definitely, in terms of our involvement as a district, thanks to their work, something that we'll celebrate this evening. The second reason I'm so excited about this is because this does come right on the tail of yesterday's incredible Martin Luther King Day 22nd annual celebration. And so the opportunity to present on this topic is just a pleasure, and just reminding me of the inspirational addresses we heard from students, from community members, and from so many others. And so it serves as a poignant reminder that Dr. King's message, more than a half a century ago, talked about our goal, our hope, our dream, that our children will be judged by the content of the character, not by the color of their skin. And by extension, to borrow from some of the words yesterday, not by the language spoken at home, not by the amount of money that the parents might bring in, and certainly not by the practices of worship that a family may choose to engage in or not. And I believe it's truly with that vision in mind that the Board of Education, the West Hartford Board of Education, back in 1989, established a policy that talked about teaching religion, not in any secular way, not in any way to promote one religion or any religion, but to understand it as a key variable in terms of the evolution of history, of economics, of politics, and of culture. And certainly we've had a lot of partnership in that. We have in the audience, I know, Terry Schmidt, who's been involved, who's helped us also with a partnership with the Connecticut Center for Interreligious Understandings. I call it the CCIU, and I struggle with that. The Religious Freedom Center and the Harvard Religious Literacy Project have been incredible partners to us in this work, have been incredible source for expertise. And so it's to the credit of these folks, so I want to immediately turn it over to them and let them wow you with their presentation.
So good evening. I'm thrilled to be here, and thanks for the wonderful introduction. And it's exciting work, and it's work that this Board of Education and this town has been committed to for 30 years. So the Board of Ed policy in front of you is one of our foundations or framing for today's conversation, and also our Board of Education policy related to cultural diversity, which we'll flip to in a moment. I'll leave it up there for the public to read if they are not familiar with this policy that, again, has been in place for many years. The exciting thing about this policy, written then with vision from the Board of Ed members who came before you, is that it's very much grounded in widely accepted practices and guidelines around the teaching of religion. The American Academy of Religious Studies, other groups that work as religious scholars, social studies scholars. And so I just want to reiterate some of those widely accepted guidelines that are really inherent in this policy. And one is that a school's approach to religion is academic and not devotional. I think it's very important to delineate between those approaches. That a school may expose students to a diversity of religious views, but may not impose any particular view. Again, that's part of that widely accepted practice. That we would strive for student awareness of religions, but do not press for any acceptance of any particular religion or religious practice. That a school might sponsor a study about religion, but not the practice of religion. A school would educate about all religions, but not promote or denigrate religion. And finally, a school informs students about various beliefs, but does not seek to conform students to any particular belief. And so I'm going to ask Jessica if you can move to the next slide. Thinking about those widely accepted practices, they also very much dovetail with our cultural diversity policy that this board has upheld and that we have promoted through our work to build cultural competence over the past 2 years. So the board policy is very well grounded in really widely accepted practice around the teaching of religion, and really I think as Mr. Moore stated, has put this district in a place that many others are not. That we've been having the conversation and are continuing to have the conversation as we are this evening. So to give you a little bit of a grounding beyond our own policy, kind of the context of where all this lies, the National Council for the Social Studies, they're a national organization for social studies educators, had put together in 2015 what they call the C3 framework, the College, Career, and Civic Life Framework. And this outlines our expectations, are what students should know and be able to do as social studies scholars. What's a shift that you might notice, and I want it particularly if you notice to mention two, where people in the past may have thought of social studies around history and purely history. We're really looking at multiple dimensions of thinking about social studies, the geography, civics, and economics understandings for students across the K-12 continuum. And these standards are banded together. So there are K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and high school standards or expectations. So by the end of second grade, by the end of fifth grade, et cetera. And what's important about these standards is that there's latitude. So each state would then decide whether or not to adopt them. And so our state said, we're not just going to take the package. We're going to take a look at it together as a state group of individuals and create our own Connecticut framework. So actually, Ashley and Jessica both were informing that process. So Connecticut has a framework aligned with this C3 national framework. What's most important to note is that we're in transition to these standards. They were adopted in 2015. We've taken a look over them during the 16-17 school year and are just beginning to go through a revision process. We went through our curriculum review process during that same school year, so we are in the process of curriculum revision. What a great time to then consider how integrating instruction on religion can fit. So we're in a primed, excellent time to consider. But what has emerged in this conversation, as Jessica will talk about now, is what's missing and compelling is, in that C3 document, is a need to specifically identify guidelines for instruction about religion. That while there were inherent in studying economics and history and civic life, there are inherently concepts and notions about religion and culture that were infused across those dimensions. There were not really specific guidelines. And so Jessica was part of work at the national level over the past year to develop a companion document. So I'm going to invite her to talk about that, and then Ashley will be talking about our work at K-5.
I'll say one other thing about Ashley. Ashley's a former student of mine, too. So this is really cool for me today to sit next to her and work with her as colleagues instead of as her teacher. A long time ago. So the Religious Studies Companion document was added to the National Standards document, and it was adopted in June of last year, so 2017. And I'll talk a little bit, and then I'll explain what it is you're looking at there. So this was over a year ago. A writing team got together. It consisted of religious studies scholars, educators. There were 8 people on the team, and it was organized by the Religious Freedom Center, which is housed at the Newseum Institute in Washington, D.C. There's a whole host of I guess it's part of the First Amendment Center, an offshoot of the First Amendment Center, which is also housed at the Newseum. And so when we wrote the Religious Studies Companion document, it had to be written as an appendix because the book was already published. There are also appendices for anthropology. There's an appendix for anthropology, sociology, and psychology. So the religious studies piece came after all of those pieces, but it's modeled on the same, uses the same format as the others. And so even though it was included as an appendix, there was a lot of conversation because courses like psychology and anthropology and sociology are often standalone electives, particularly at the high school level. And this was a document we were writing for grades 9-12, so it's written for high school educators. But the part of our conversation when we were writing the standards was that religious studies isn't intended to be, although it can be, but it wasn't intended when we wrote it to be a standalone course. So, we're sitting here in front of you talking about religion and religious studies, but the intention was that to really get at the embeddedness of religion throughout the study of history, geography, economics, civics. And so there's an embeddedness to the study of religion that was missing in those other 4 disciplines. And so when we added it, there was a lot of talk, how will we do that? How will we integrate the study of religion into those other areas? So rather than having a religious studies class, how does it become part of the study of history, the study of civics? So that's what the document is intended to do. It's intended to be a vehicle for teachers to be able to embed the standards within courses that they're already teaching, but it's also intended to support schools that do have courses that are standalone religious studies courses, and both exist in public schools nationwide, something I learned. So what you're looking at up there is 3 categories. So there are 14 standards about religion that are in this document, and they fall into 3 categories, and you're looking at those 3 categories. And so there are 4 standards specific to religious studies premises and methods of inquiry. There are an additional 5 standards that get at the application of religious studies premises, this idea of belief, the study of belief, behavior, and belonging. And then there's a critical inquiry. The rest of the standards fall into this critical inquiry, which really gets at how do we attack source material and how do we use different representations. And to talk to them very quickly, the first really gets at basic assertions about religions and the study of religion that most religious studies scholars adhere to. I'll talk about them more specifically in a little bit, or in a little while. The second, the applications, really get at it's the study of religious identity. It's not in terms of historical perspective, political, geographic, and economic. So it's how do these identities evolve and change over time? Where do they come from? How do they intersect with the study of politics, geography? And then the last, this critical inquiry piece, really gets at, it doesn't evaluate the theological or devotional question of what is right or true, but rather it uses primary and secondary sources to analyze how religious values, interpretations, and expressions shape and are shaped by individuals and communities. So it's important to distinguish between, we're not teaching religion, we're teaching about religion from a scholarly perspective. And it's really about religious studies. And I think it's important to understand that the standards were meant to promote that and to help and to serve as a tool to help teachers begin to teach about it. What the standards don't do is they don't tell you how to do any of this, but there are great resources, and I'll talk about those in a moment.
So it's my job to be able to just kind of bring you through what the teaching of religion looks like in our elementary school classrooms. Jessica really outlined what our C3 framework looks like in 912 around religious studies guidance. However, there is no guidance for elementary schools around the teaching of religion, so we've had to create our own lesson plans along the way. We are currently in the middle of a multi-year curriculum revision process for social studies when these new standards came out through the state and through the C3. We started the process of revising our social studies curriculum entirely. They did provide us with a framework for what to teach, but as I said, religion was not part of that. So when we started the curriculum revision process about 2 years ago, we started getting some questions from teachers in grades 4 and 5 around how to teach government. And as we started to dig into that a little bit more, we started realizing that really in K to 3, we needed to be able to create a civics progression document that would help give teachers in kindergarten through grade 3 some guidance around teaching citizenship and civic virtue in preparation for going into the teaching of government. And as we started creating that progression document, we started to realize that the teaching of religion fell really nicely into the civics curriculum, specifically into the developing a positive self-concept section that we had created in this progression. So what I did is I took just one section of that civics framework and put it for you up here. And this is the part of the progression document that speaks very specifically. It's where basically our religion lesson plans live within our curriculum. And if you can just hit that one more time. You'll see that really this part of the civics progression document asks students to be able to identify similarities and differences between students, specifically looking at culture and religion as a part of that culture. We've had really great response from teachers around teaching this civics curriculum. It's allowed us to really have a nice articulated curriculum, kindergarten all the way up through grade 5, around the teaching of the understanding of self and social awareness and the rights and responsibilities of citizens, and religion has fallen very nicely into this. Could you just advance it one more? So what we've done so far, as I said, we were in the middle of a curriculum revision process. we have started to, our religion lesson plans have typically they've been in place since the inception of the Board of Education policy in the late 80s. So our lesson plans have stayed the same for all of that time. Because we're in the middle of a curriculum revision process right now, and in wanting to create a curriculum that, as as Jessica had said, embeds religion more seamlessly into the curriculum instead of having it be a standalone lesson plan, we've started this revision process with our grade 4 and 5. So right now, as it is, we have religion being taught through the lens of religious holidays. So grade levels were assigned specific religious holidays. Teachers would choose a day in the school year to, let's just say, teach about Passover. Teachers would teach that lesson plan about Passover and then would move on, and that would be the only teaching of religion that they did throughout the year. Through this revision process, we've started to make changes to the curriculum and try to embed it so that it was more culturally relevant and took the advice of the C3 framework. So in grades 4, our revised curriculum is having students study West Hartford government and history. Students are looking at all the different ways that West Hartford is unique. They're also looking at Connecticut state history and government. They're looking at major events in Connecticut's history, people that have played an important role in Connecticut's history. So what we did in creating a lesson plan that would marry well with that curriculum is we started looking at the ways in West Hartford is diverse. So we have students look at a town diversity profile, and I was really happy to hear Tom bring up the home language report, because as part of this lesson plan for religion, we actually have our students look at the home language report as one way that West Hartford is diverse. We have them look at the type of restaurants that are available in town. We have them look at even age distribution within the residents of our town. And we also have them look at the places of worship that are available within town. So students are able to have conversations with their teachers facilitating, around all the different ways that West Hartford is diverse, and religion being one of them. And in grade 5, we are having students look at early U.S. history. It's the first course that they get in their career as a student. And they study early explorers, and they also go into colonization. So the lesson plan that we've created to go along with that unit has been around how religions and traditions and beliefs help to shape the development of the different colonies that were the original 13 colonies that were founded. So we've made these changes in grade 4 and 5. We've had teachers respond very positively to these changes. This year, we're going to be working with our vertical teams and other groups to be able to revise our kindergarten through 3rd grade religion lesson plans to do the same, to make sure that they're really embedded within our curriculum and they're not just a standalone lesson plan anymore.
It's not part of the slides, but I'll just share because I pulled this after. So kind of following along the same ideas, in 7th grade, when students are enrolled in world regional studies, one of the questions that they explore is how do values, beliefs, and traditions contribute to the complexity of a region? And that is a question that we tackle when we talk about the Middle East in 7th grade. So it goes to that embedded nature of, and the idea that religion is embedded in all facets and you can't separate it out. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the work and the opportunities that West Hartford teachers have had, both to be leaders and to participate. And there's 2 things, didn't know if it was echoing. I'll go back and I'll do a little bit of history. So how did West Hartford get to be, as Tom said, kind of leaders in this work? And I'm not going to get the years right because it feels maybe 8 years, but it could be longer. 8. We'll go with 8. 8 years ago, there were some members of an interfaith organization, the Connecticut Council for Interreligious Understanding, And they approached the West Hartford Public Schools and with just questions. That's what they approach with, questions about how we approach religion in our schools. And they not only brought questions with them, but they brought Dr. Diane Moore from the Harvard Divinity School with them too, to engage in a conversation and sort of share her thinking as well. And so those questions turned into a partnership and an exploration of how we could do things better for our students. And we worked with CCIU on, we were a small part of a very large grant that they wrote to the Hartford Foundation. And that grant included, and it was a really important piece of the grant, and I think part of the reason why they got the money from the Hartford Foundation was they built in a program that was specific to providing professional development for teachers in the greater Hartford area. And the other thing that did, that grant gave them, was the opportunity to hire a director for CCIU, and that's Terry, who's sitting back there. Hey again, Terry. So, who has been a major proponent and has really taken this program of teacher training of how to teach about religion, and has been a huge supporter of helping us get not only our teachers trained, but teachers in, I think it's been about 40 teachers from, I think, 13 districts have been trained over the last 5 years in the summer, and West Hartford provides the venue for that. And so teachers come here. We have Professor Moore from Harvard Divinity School, who leads the Religious Literacy Project. She comes here, and we work with a small group of teachers, because like we said, there's lots of stuff out there. Now there's a document out there, although our program started before then, before there was the religious studies document, but there's a need to understand how to teach. It's not okay just to say, hey, it's in your curriculum, here's the question you want to ask kids, but it's how that plays out in a classroom is where sometimes Tom will get the phone calls that he's talking about, or I will get the phone calls, or teachers will get challenged. So really a lot of it focuses on the need for professional learning for our teachers around how do you do this in a classroom in a way that meets what Carrie spoke about, that meets those requirements of what it means to teach about religion. And so I mentioned that the standards document includes some basic assertions about the teaching of religion, and I've learned never to say all, so I will say most religious studies scholars, or at the very least the ones who wrote the document with us, would go to these, that there's a clear distinction between the devotional assertion and the study of diverse devotional assertions, that religions, but probably more important are these other three, that religions are internally diverse, that religions evolve and change, and that religious influences are embedded in cultures, which really speaks to what Ashley was talking about, and the approach that they're taking to teaching about religion in the elementary schools. And so what we do in the summer is we actually explore these assertions, and we just deepen understanding of what this would look like to teach from these assertions in a classroom. And I'm not going to give the lesson there, but I can assure you that the teachers who go through the program, and I know in the materials you had, there was a link to a video, which I think if you just get paper copies, you can't click on that. But there is a link in there. Someday it'll happen. But there is a link in there to a video that's worth watching. It describes from the teacher's perspective. Tom talks in the video too, and speaks to the notion of what it means to teach about religion in schools. But it's probably worth watching to get a good sense of what that program looks like. And the funding for that program has all come from from CCIU and the Hartford Foundation. The Hartford Foundation grant and other donors that they've been able to pull together. So it's probably worth mentioning that CCIU is an interfaith organization that is promoting this understand this very interesting method for teaching about religion. It's called the Cultural Studies Method, and they really fund teachers just getting smart about how to teach about religion in schools. So that partnership's been amazing, and the grant has run out. So we need to think of creative ways of making sure we can continue to provide professional learning for teachers.
So in closure on this day after Martin Luther King Day, and in light of hearing about this learning, we appreciate the opportunity to reiterate our board policy and to share with you our ongoing continuous improvement efforts in our curriculum, in our instruction, our professional learning and leadership. And I think the piece I also would like to mention is our partnerships with families and community organizations to make sure this understanding is clear. It's a constant need for that communication through documentation, through things like curriculum nights and course proposal documents and all those types of things that we in our curriculum office are part of producing and gaining input to. So we appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and welcome your questions.
Thank you so much. And I know people have lots of questions, so I throw it open to the floor.
I'll start. I have a question. Well, I have a comment and the question. First, I'd like to thank the panel on your great work. This is very progressive, and I was just fascinated by the report, and I know it took a lot of time and effort, and clearly it shows, and your presentation was just great. A couple of questions I had when I looked through the report, and one was, you mentioned in terms of the professional learning where you participated over some summers and how to teach religion in public schools. So my question was, what were some of the districts, or what were some of the other districts that you basically learned from, or what have you? I'm just curious in terms of the similarity.
I think that one's for me. So we made a conscious effort to bring together diverse districts. The basic, so we had districts, it was 5 different high schools, each, or middle schools in some cases, each sent 2 teachers from the same school. So we trained 10 teachers each summer with the understanding that 2 teachers would always be from West Hartford every year. We provide the venue, we run the program, so we get the training every year. So I won't be able to, I didn't bring it with me, now I wish I had. I'll list as many districts as I can remember, but I'll tell you that we brought together at least some more affluent suburban and urban and rural districts in these different cohorts. So we had Conard and Hall teachers participate. We've had Newington. We had Windsor. We had Hartford. We've had I'll say Vernon teachers from Rockville High School. We've had Berlin. Can I phone a friend back there? I think we did have Simsbury. We've had Simsbury. We've had Farmington. I think we had Glastonbury in our first year. That's 10. So I said we did about 13. So I think I'm good there. I know we've done others, and I can get you a list. But yeah, we tried to bring different teachers from different areas. Oh, I believe we had New Britain too. Yeah.
Question I had was, when you begin to roll it out, and I'm always conscious of those parents and guardians who are unable to attend the curriculum night and the PTOs, and I'm sure you have a way of getting this information to them, but can you just elaborate how that will be done?
At elementary, it's embedded in our curriculum documents, so each year we produce curriculum in a nutshell, which have become more than a nutshell, and that probably need to change the name. We have some lengthy, detailed curriculum documents, and as we revise our curriculum, we work to update those documents. So each fall, all families receive a curriculum document. It's also online, so if people needed to translate, they could use it through our online resource. So that's one really critical way in writing, even if you can't, attend, or you're at another child's event or that type of thing. And certainly, at this point, we're talking lesson level work. And so obviously children would be, coming home and communicating with their families as well. But that curriculum night and those curriculum documents that we share with guides for families are really critical at elementary.
Yes, thank you again. I have a two-part comment and question. First off, thank you again for the presentation. I too attended the MLK Day celebration yesterday with my two daughters, and it was wonderful. And it also reminded me that it's important to celebrate the diversity of West Hartford, not only on a day, but throughout the school year. So thank you so much for echoing that is the perspective that we are trying to take on. Recognizing that with the languages report, thank you for sharing with us, and also with the religious pieces being taught. In terms of the training that the teachers go through, what approach is taken when it comes to talking about religion and the historical perspective of it that addresses pieces that are not that harmonious in terms of our history? How is it approached from a real perspective and one that addresses, again, topics that at times are taboo to talk about?
Let me see if I can start the answer and then have others chime in. Certainly, I'd first like to reinforce that our effort is certainly evolving. It was for years and years that the elementary curriculum was kind of standalone. So you'd have that one lesson plan. So today you'd wander in, and certainly it was advertised within our curriculum in a nutshell. But in and around this time of year, it might be, hey, today we're going to study Hanukkah. Today we're going to study, whether it's Christmas or Kwanzaa or whatever it might be, and it was not connected, and so it felt very abrupt, and it would often sometimes catch our parents off guard. So the intent now, by embedding it, is to try to identify at a developmental level those appropriate sort of connections to that study. So in an elementary setting, I think that's where they have that connection to the civics, where we're understanding about each other, we're understanding about our own identity and the diversity that's around us. So it's probably not going to get to that same level where we're going to look at potential contentious differences. But perhaps by the time students are a little bit more mature and a little bit more evolved in their thinking, and I like Jess's example about the regional studies, perhaps in grade 7, or certainly modern world history in grade 9, where you're really looking at, and to a certain degree this has existed always, religion as a driver for what some of the greater historical incidents are, what some of the how that impacted on economics, how that impacted, to Tom's point, in terms of migration patterns and things of this nature, and I think the professional learning, and I don't know if you have a good specific, to enable teachers to be able to feel comfortable because they've had some understanding, wading into that water and talking a little bit about it. I know certainly in my role in the short time I've been in central office that the discomfort, even under our old model, when teachers say, and I've lost the grade level, but if it's the study of Diwali, and the teacher's like, I really don't know anything about it and I don't feel comfortable handling questions. So moving away from that standalone piece to where they can talk about the study of religion as a variable within social studies, within politics, and giving them professional learning as to, okay, at this grade level, this is sort of the essence of the point that we're going to try to get across. I hope enables that, and it will take on a different look in a 3rd grade classroom versus a 10th grade classroom.
This is, if I could jump in, Lauren, because it's a great question that everybody struggles with, really. And Cheryl and I will look at each other sometimes when it's a history question because we share similar interests. And we're not, I honestly, my biggest struggles when I go into an elementary classroom are when they ask me a question that I know too much about. And I'm trying to think of, but if I leave this out, they don't really get the context, and it's not the place for context. There's an element where we're not going to go into Sunni and Shiite Islam and what the root causes of the split were. We're talking about the general themes. And so it's kind of finding that, and that's why we have people like Ashley here, whose job is to look at that overall, how do we train teachers? Because we're not going to give them a master's course in the history of religion. We're going to talk to them about how do they answer those questions without sugarcoating, but also without kind of diving into areas that really they're not comfortable with, and very few of us would be comfortable with, but it's that broad overview. Ashley?
We're also really fortunate to have a CSI structure that allows us to be able to have dialogue with teachers. So this year, because we made the revision to the grade 4 and 5 lesson plans, religion lesson plans, and the general grade 4 and 5 curriculum, we made sure that our district-based CSIs are focusing on social studies in grades 4 and 5, just in grades 4 and 5. So all the other grade levels are focusing on different subject areas. And that's really allowed us, as we're moving through these units, to have teachers have dialogue with, how did the lesson plan go? What kind of questions came up, so that we can be prepared in future years to answer questions. And it really just allows us more time to be able to just kind of debrief how things have gone and make any changes or revisions if we need to.
Can I just piggyback on that question, because I think it's really important. I was going to come at it a slightly different way, but I think it fits the same, which is, and I can't help myself because I am a historian, the colonial piece, we talk about colonial America.
Even now.
Yes, it is problematic on several levels for me. First of all, it completely erases Native Americans. Completely. It's like, oh, well, how did attitudes of the Puritans differ from the attitudes of whatever, right? So that's the first thing. But secondly, it erases slavery in the sense of how did their religion lead the New England people to do this and the North Carolina people to do that, is a very different question from how could people who consider themselves Christian understand slavery. I'm not saying, and again, that gets to the difficult question, and I'm concerned because, as you said, you don't want to say to kindergartners, so, people used to be slaves. I mean, right, you don't want to go there. On the other hand, you don't want to pretend it didn't happen. And so I am kind of concerned about how these issues get addressed on these different levels. And again, I'm not criticizing you. I'm struggling with how you can possibly do that.
We were on a national conference call, the three of us, Friday afternoon, with religious studies scholars and others, debating this very thing. That there is as Paula said, a developmental appropriateness that we have to consider. That children are concrete thinkers. I mean, there are religious psychologists who study how children begin to understand religion, those who maybe have a formal religion upbringing and those who do not, and that understanding. And so we had a very rich debate on Friday, intellectual debate on Friday afternoon, because there were at times when we said, really, we're developing in K3 a foundation of really citizenry, of civics, of understanding how to have conversation and dialogue. As we witnessed among this group tonight, we want to prepare students to have that kind of dialogue, as you did this evening, as we did on Friday with those religious scholars, that we're grounding people. We're not sugarcoating it. We're saying people have conflict. And the conflict we might be talking about is not going to be the Sunni Muslim conflict around specific religions, but it's just that there are, and that our identities may cause conflict. And so, there are other identities we may talk about, but we're not going to necessarily go in depth. But it's really grounding children in the notion that there's internal diversity, as we mentioned, among groups, that we absolutely have Native American studies as part of our integrated curriculum in third grade and certainly in fifth grade as well. That the notion we talked about Friday with this group was there are stories that all cultures tell, It's important to recognize those stories, to have multiple perspectives, so those standards, if we put them back up there, force us to say in our curriculum writing, in our instruction, there are multiple perspectives on similar events. And so, we have to be cautious not to tell one story. We are in our inquiry, in our framework in social studies thinking that way, and our language arts framework is saying the same thing to us. Our science standards are saying the same thing. There are multiple perspectives, and so I think if we're grounded in that across multiple content areas as teachers, as educators and leaders, I think it keeps us from some of those dangers.
And as we've become better about looking at looking at cultural competency too in our district, I think teachers are not shying away at all at approaching those multiple perspectives. Our fifth grade teachers have had a unit on colonization for a very long time and are very comfortable with starting and facilitating those conversations around relationship with the natives and slavery and around the founding of these colonies through religion. So I think that teachers are very comfortable with having those conversations. Now, to what extent are you going to have those conversations? But we want to prepare our students for some of the tough conversations that they're going to have in the middle school too. The curriculum really does ramp up. So would it be appropriate in kindergarten? No. But is it appropriate as we move into fifth grade? Absolutely.
Thank you. I just want to say as well, and I certainly respect and appreciate recognizing the developmental level at which to share certain bits of information. And I very much respect and appreciate that you're recognizing certain topics may be difficult. But I must say for the record as well that it's unfortunate that there are some young people where certain topics are put upon them even if they're not ready to be faced with them. Certain persons may choose to be exposed to and learn, where others it's forced upon them. And we know that learning certainly takes place not only within the school building, but also outside in the community as well. And there's some young people that are exposed to certain events that they may bring into the classroom. I have 2 elementary school children. I know of other children as well. And so I think those realities we must recognize. And when those pieces are put out there, I appreciate you made the comment of not sugarcoating, because that certainly is not going to address the problem. So I appreciate the candor in which you're receiving these comments and also being open-minded in how to move forward as well.
It's impossible for our kids not to come in with what they live. And for us to be ignorant of that is a dramatic disservice. And that's actually where we have to be humans. There's the element really of, it's this cultural awareness. How do we learn about it? How do we make sure? Because it's a dramatic shift. When I see something on exploration now is far different than Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And so teachers are talking about, well, what about those people that were here? And that's different than what they were taught. And they don't all have history degrees. And so that is the professional development that we do is paramount in these areas. We always talk about the math. We talk about, we're always working on this in the classroom. We can't shy away from social studies in West Hartford in the elementary schools. And it's too easy to. And that's the thing, is that it's too easy. And then you run into the problem with, well, they brought in a speaker and parents didn't want that speaker there. Well, I'll refrain from that point.
Just to build on that, because I was thinking about how to train teachers, especially in the early grades, to be broad enough and general enough to introduce these ideas, and yet recognize that there may be kids in your own classroom who are from that particular faith community but don't believe those things, or their assumptions about those. So I think there is an ongoing sort of support system that's necessary, and I'm really glad that that's part of it. But I also think that the training does a second thing, which again I want to commend you for, which is not just that it trains teachers about how to deal with these difficult, when someone says, well, but isn't it true, whatever, it also models to students how to rethink their own position. Because when the teacher says, well, some people believe that, but other people believe such and such, it opens the door for kids to then say that themselves. So I think teachers have a dual role, and that's why this teacher training is so important, right? Is not only to do it themselves in their classrooms, but to model those kinds of things, because absolutely, kids are going to come in with attitudes that you can't challenge each one, but you can teach them to challenge themselves. So I think it's really important to do this ongoing, right? Because they're always going to come up with things, but I just think it's a fabulous beginning. So thank you. Other questions, thoughts?
Were you going to ask about this?
About the, I wasn't, but I will come back. I will. No. This is just a question about when you wrote in it, the school educates about all religions. It does not promote or denigrate religion in the list of things that your principles. I just wondered, how do you, I mean, you're not literally going to do all religions, I understand that, but how does one decide what counts? You know what I mean? You don't understand the question, which is incoherent.
If I may, I wanted you to ask that because I want to expand on it a little bit. How do you decide when a religion is at a point where it might be included in the studies as well?
So teachers are expected to teach about religion, and it happens in a variety of ways. And we're even though we are probably far ahead in terms of our training of teachers, the number of teachers who are trained in West Hartford is actually very, very small compared to the number of people who are implementing our social studies curriculum K-12. So I think that's important. So the need for training, and I appreciate that you recognize, is really important when you're trying to teach something, when you're trying to teach about religion or just about anything. But there's three ways that sort of these decisions get made, and one is that the curriculum actually demands the coverage of the historical origins of some of these traditions, right? So in a history class where you're trying to understand something that's happening, either the historical or the historical origins or contemporary relevance, right? So if you're trying to study current events or you're trying to look at why things happened, the good, the bad, and the ugly, there's definitely a shift. And I'll just speak to Lorna's point before, because I think I love your question, because it really gets at the idea. There's been a shift in public schools, and I think the new standards actually support this shift away from trying to look at religion as this unifying, look at how we're more similar than we are different. And that the problem with presenting religion only through that lens is that it's in direct contradiction with what kids see and what they hear. And so there's definitely a shift away from that. So one of the decisions is where in the curriculum, it's not about picking the religions and then placing them in the curriculum, but it's having a well-developed curriculum built on standards, and there are points in that curriculum where talking about religion is essential to understanding what's happening either today, from a contemporary standpoint or from a historical standpoint. The other places, this would speak more to in terms of social studies at the elementary level, it's that that the novels or stories that we're teaching have explicit religious themes or allusions, and you can't avoid them. You miss something if you don't educate students about what that means or why an author put that there. And then the last one, and again, I think it speaks to what you're talking about, it's that the kids bring it into the room. And that probably happens more often than people realize. So parents who are at home, your kids bring things into our classrooms, and they're wonderful things. They're questions and they're stories and their personal experiences. But this is where the teacher training piece where we really need more of this for our teachers, because it's what do you do with it once it's entered the room? And I think that speaks kind of the heart of your question. I hope I'm answering yours, and at the same time kind of speaking to the heart of what you were getting at. It's the how do you, and the way you do it is through, there's actually lots of great resources for teachers on this, and that's what we're trying to bring into West Hartford, bring in sort of the best models for teaching about religion. But by acknowledging that it's there and demonstrating respect for what's been brought in, and acknowledging that there are multiple perspectives. And I think that speaks to the heart of the method that we teach teachers, which is the cultural studies method, which you could apply, we apply that method to specifically to religion. It involves, I wrote some, just to give you a quick understanding of what I mean by cultural studies. It talks about the embedded nature of the study of religion. It acknowledges that all claims of knowledge are situated, so that there's a context for every knowledge claim, religious or otherwise, that same situatedness applies to any text that you're going to read. It was written at a certain point in time with someone with a particular point of view. We even dig into the idea that a lot of when we're talking about religion, what we're really talking about in terms of historical context is this notion of power and powerlessness. So whose stories have prominence, who rises to power at a given point in time, and whose stories, which groups of people might be marginalized, or whose stories aren't we telling? And that becomes the problem when Tom was talking about what happens in some places where people get upset. It's because we're telling a story, and we've made a decision to tell a story, as opposed to saying there are stories. The study of religion is teaching about religion is about teaching about these multiple perspectives, which goes back to the idea that there's the internal diversity of religion, or within religion. And then the last is that this understanding that cultural norms are fluid and they're socially constructed. And so that's the method we teach teachers. And then we provide teachers with the opportunity to choose something in their own curriculum, in their own courses that they want to kind of play around with this idea, with these ideas, I should say. But it's good resources in the hands of trained teachers that allow us to do what can potentially be difficult work with students around teaching about religion. So I hope I touched on a couple of different pieces there.
I have to say, you're making this particular historian's heart sing.
Oh,
so thank you. I think that's what it's all about, is teaching that there are many different perspectives and we need to honor them and understand them and honor them. I think that's great. Other comments, questions? Thank you so much. This was really great. Okay, now that I said that was wonderful, we move to what is then entitled Routine Matters, which is the financial report, which is never routine in our group. Exactly, and that will make my heart sing, precisely. So I'd like to hear a motion that we approve the financial report for the period ending November 30th, 2017.
So moved.
Second? Discussion, sir. Oh, wait. I just want to give full credit to Chip. We asked him this time to do it also projected on the monitor so the folks listening at home can follow along with us. So we'll give him a minute, and I believe, Mark, you are the financial examiner up
Yes,
this
this
time.
will be my maiden voyage.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, it's under
Big hardest to.
bottom left. I think the bottom left.
Make your computer cancel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Listen to the high school students.
I was just going to say, we need those Legos, kids.
Chip, I never pictured you as a looping roller coaster guy.
All right, we could, if you go to the next page, I guess, Chip, thanks. Okay, so on page 16 of your packets, you'll see the financial report for the projected balance of the general fund, period ending November 30th, 2017. Not a lot of report. This is a broad snapshot of the projected balances. I'll try to go into some detail. So first, we see salaries, $333,000. And if you refer to page 17, I go in some of the detail. So line items 5, 12, 13, and 14, you'll see that there's a change from prior month of $50,000. Just a minor update with 900 plus teachers, not a significant number. Then if you go to line 5116, $80,000. That's lower overtime and then fewer bus monitors. And security, lower security overtime as well. So 5117 also paraprofessionals, that's a minor update, $20,000 from last month. And then 5140 custodial, 60,000, that just represents a vacant full-time position. And then 5150's maintenance, and that's just a minor update of $20,000. And then teacher's assistants of 5185, you'll see 100,000, that's turnover from unfilled positions. So that represents about $330,000 change for that particular account salary. And then benefits, unemployment compensation, fewer, it's line item 5206, fewer and shorter unemployment claims. It's $60,000. Again, not a huge number, but $60,000 nonetheless. And then if you look at purchases services, just a minor update on pupil transportation of $20,000, and that total change will give you the $410,000 change prior to last month in December. So.
Can I just ask you for a second? Now that everybody can see this in the audience, this means, just to clarify, that we have this, that this is money that we thought we might have to spend that we now no longer are spending.
Right,
So it's
projected.
a positive for the budget. We're not spending yet. That's right.
Right.
That's right. I just wanted to
So, and the
clarify.
current balance is 1.123.
Right.
So, and historically, Chip, we always give some money back to the town, and this is what that represents.
Thank you.
All right. Turning the page to the state and federal grant refunds. No real changes here this month. I just want to point out to you some of the bigger line items is the IDA Part B section, which is account 509 365, 2.1 million, and 509 308 is $951,000. Insignificant changes on this, and not much to report. Next page. This is the special funds report. So bring your attention to line item 591081, the tuition, the 45,000, that's lower revenue from our open choice students. That's what that's representing. Other than that, no significant information on that.
Again, can I just
Sure.
interrupt you? Do you happen to know, or does anybody know, why we have less revenue than we expected? Is the state paying us less?
No, actually, the state's paying us more. This is revenue that we get back from Hartford for the special education services that we provide to the Hartford choice students.
Mm-hmm.
And so the state pays us more, so Hartford pays us less.
Ah.
Thank you, Chip. Then if we go into our favorite, the lunch, West Hartford Public Schools Nutritional Services Program. Again, we broke even in November. We have a deficit of $37,130 for November. It's pretty good compared to last year. Nothing really to report in that particular number, but it's a positive impact from last year's number. Other than that, no real significant changes in this. So if there's any questions? No?
Can we have a round of applause for
Chip,
that
how'd I
maiden
do?
voyages?
Awesome job, Mark.
Well done.
All done by Chip Ward, all the tutelage.
Thank you. That was great. A little too fast because we like to enjoy it, but
Well,
I don't mean you were
I had the
rushing.
spirit of Jay Sargent in me.
Well,
in this
exactly. No, I just mean we want to
rambunctious
revel in it,
presentation.
as we really want to discuss it. Okay, thank you. So then, do I have a vote to accept the minutes? I mean, the financial report? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The ayes happen to have it. Okay. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Chip.
Let's see. Okay, approval of the minutes, am I in the right place? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting of December 19th, 2017?
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes, sorry, I assume there were no changes or discussion? Okay, the ayes have it anyway. Thank you. Okay, board members, communication and reports. I know, Lorna, you had, no? No. Yes, of course.
Briefly, just speaking on behalf of the Substance Abuse Prevention Commission, which is a wonderful commission that services preventative measures of addressing substance abuse in the town. I think it's really important to acknowledge the preventative measures bit. I'm a wonderful group, and there's some activities that are coming down the pike. More information will be shared. The young people are planning a fundraising for their event, and there also is an upcoming Take Back Day. Geared for all persons, but really trying to work with the elderly as well in terms of proper ways of disposing of medication. So more information to come on that. Again, the Substance Abuse Prevention Commission, or SAPC, is what it is referred to.
Thank you. Other updates?
I just have, it's an announcement, I guess, more or less sharing from CREC. They're inviting folks to join them for 2018 legislative breakfast. That's going to be held February 15th at 8 a.m. In room 310 at the state capitol, and the snow date is Thursday, February 22nd. I would encourage everyone to attend if they possibly can. This is the issue is to make education issues front and center at the upcoming session, and this is being sponsored by the Hartford Area Superintendents Association, CABE, as well as the Connecticut Associations of, and CREC. So it's the Hartford Area Superintendents Association, CABE, which is the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education, and the Capital Regional Educational Council. So put that on your calendar if you're interested.
Thank you. I just have to say I went for the first time last time, and it's way more useful and educational than you'd think. There are lots of legislators there, and you talk to them and tell them how important things are, and then you all hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and then they go away and vote the wrong way, but that's besides the point. Okay, on that cheery note, any other reports from the non-students? Oh, there you go. Well then, either Mark or the other two students, do you have, this is our second favorite part after the youngsters perform, update from our student board representatives.
So today, Conard announced the students who won awards in the Scholastic 2018 art exhibit. We had Ian Nicastro and Thomas Wilson with silver medals, and Cameron Slocum with a gold medal. And the exhibition is open January 14th through the 28th at Hartford Art School's Art Gallery. Additionally, Conard's Best Kept Secrets, which is an evening event for parents of 8th, 9th, and 10th graders, as well as newcomers to Conard, will be held February 1st at 7 p.m. in the Conard Caf. This is really specifically tips for navigating Conard in the years to come. So, also, the third annual Chieftain Baseball Pasta Dinner fundraiser will be held in the Conard Cafe February 6th. And in lieu of the upcoming midterms, Conard National Honor Society is holding its annual Study with a Buddy for midterms. One was held today from 3 to 5 in the library, and another session will be held January 18th from 3 to 5 in Conard Room 169. And this is really so National Honor Society students can tutor any level student, and snacks are provided. Something else very exciting for Conard is that therapy dogs are coming on Friday. So from 8:30 a.m. from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. They're going to come in. They're dogs from Tales of Joy, and they're offering students an opportunity to de-stress before exams. And I'm also very proud to announce that Conard won the Hall Conard basketball game tonight. So just to brag a little bit.
Boys game.
Yeah, the boys game, the boys game. But still, woo! Thank you.
Happy and healthy New Year to everyone. And on a note of basketball, congratulations to women's basketball player Amber Reisner, who just scored her 1,000th point tonight, and it was the second one in Hall history. So it's a really big deal. There has also been a lot of school spirit recently. A lot of kids have been going out to hockey games and basketball games. That's been very exciting. Right after break, the Student Association hosted the annual Mr. Hall pageant, and 12 seniors donned their finest formal wear and showed off a diverse array of talents. It was very interesting. Link Crew is hosting Cocoa and Cram, which is similar to Grace's National Honor Society tutoring, in its review sessions for freshman classes for the few days leading to exams starting tomorrow, or who knows if it's tomorrow. Like, I don't know. Unless anyone has a hint. And then the administration is working to combat prevalent vape usage by closing some bathrooms, increasing security, and educating students.
Thank you, and good luck on midterms to both of you and everyone else.
Just one alibi so that we can get some attendance there. The Hall Conard girls basketball game is this Friday at 6:45 at Conard.
Not that we have any agenda either way on who's going to. Absolutely. Thank you. To promote attendance, exactly, because we don't know what's going to happen. All right. Thank you. Future meeting dates for those of you waiting in eager anticipation. Tuesday, February 6th, our meeting will include the adoption of the CIP, as usual at 7 o'clock right here. And then, hang on to your hats, it's a Wednesday, February 21st. We have another Board of Education meeting, again at 7, but again, it's on Wednesday, the 21st. Any future agenda items to request? Okay. Any of you hardy few wish to make any comments from the floor? Okay, special shout out to Terry Schmidt, who had a lot to do with the whole amazing religion rollout, so thank you for that. We have no executive session, so I would undertake I would appreciate a motion for adjournment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.